One-on-one, we are back. WFUV 90.7. Ryan Gregware with me. I'm Chris Hennessy. Kayla Wentzel joins us for this segment as well. We're going to talk some quarterbacks. We are about 2.5 weeks away from the first round of the NFL draft, where we will see at least 4, potentially 5 quarterbacks selected, and one of them will go to the New York Jets. That's because the Jets traded away Sam Darnold. Number 14 goes down to Carolina, links up with potential future coach of the Jets, Matt Rule, and former New York Jets wide receiver Robbie Anderson, in what will be the death of me if they win the Super Bowl. But that's okay. The Jets get a second-round pick, which I honestly did not think they were going to. And Ryan, I'll start with you. I do personally see this as a win for the Jets. Restart the salary cap on Sam Darnold, on the quarterback position, with Zach Wilson. Get a second-round pick next year and a couple of picks. Maybe you could use to trade up in the 4 and the 6. But overall, Joe Douglas gets done what needs to get done, and now we know that the quarterback for the New York Jets will be, in about 18 days, Zach Wilson.
Yeah, I think when you're looking at this trade, there's 3 parties at play: the Jets, Sam Darnold, and the Panthers. And I think we have a chance where all 3 can win, but 2 of them definitely win. And that starts with the Jets. You talked about getting a second rounder. There was a ton of smoke talk about getting a first, second, then it went down to a third. And it was looking kind of dry late in this free agency period when most of the teams had done their quarterback spending. We saw the football team pivot to Ryan Fitzpatrick. The Bears signed Dalton, and it looked bleak for the Jets and Joe Douglas, but credit to him because the Panthers are pretty much bidding against themselves here. And he's able to drive up the value to a second, fourth, and a 6. And now it's the point where Joe Douglas couldn't say no anymore. He had to do the deal. And so it was a deal that had to get made. I know we both probably love Sam Darnold as a person. He had some great flashes of moments here. He didn't really put the games together there, the consistent game in and out. In 2019, he ends the year kind of hot. He goes 7-6 then that year. There's a lot of promise, but 2020 was really when I think most Jets fans kind of turned their back on him and saw that they needed to look somewhere else. He goes 9 touchdowns, 11 picks for the year. He lowers his completion percentage, passer rating, QBR, pretty much every single stat he was worse at in 2020 than the year before. And I get that he's 23 and, obviously he's going into his 4th year. So he's had experience at this point, but the Jets had to reset the clock. As you talked about, you get the QB on the rookie deal. And it was I don't think it was necessarily about, Joe Douglas wanting his guy. I think it was just about Sam Darnold not being the guy because he did give him a shot. We saw Joe Douglas say he's rooting for Sam. He's a great kid. And that's kind of everything that we've already known about Sam. And the reason that it's a win for him is because he gets out of this dysfunctional organization. Obviously, Joe Beatty and Matt Rule, those are competent coaches. Joe Brady will get an NFL head coaching job in the next few years. He teams up with what you mentioned, former Jet, Robbie Anderson, and they have a ton of other weapons, DJ Moore, McCaffrey. And it really is a chance for him to prove himself because there's been a lot of talk. You see a lot of people. Obviously, there are excuses to be made, but at the same time, the production just flat out hasn't been there. So we are going to see with this move what Sam Darnold is. And I'm excited because I am a believer in Sam. I do think he was wrong with the Jets. But at the end of the day, he does have to produce in Carolina. He pretty much is running out of excuses, which is why I won't give the Panthers a win just yet. But trading only second-round pick and a few more picks for a potential franchise quarterback, that's a home run if it works out. So I think it's a good trade all around. It made sense for everyone involved.
Yeah, I think that the loser, though, is Terry Bridgewater. I think that he's the one who probably lost out of all of it in Carolina. He's clearly going into a backup job here, and his time is going to end with the Panthers. If, I guess, this works out, if Sam Darnold is the guy for the Panthers, and I think that that's really what this next season is going to be about. If Sam Darnold is worth the hype, if he's actually going to perform and he's going to produce while he's with the Panthers and while he's with an organization that isn't quite as dysfunctional. And if he actually has the skills that everyone kind of thought he had, but that they just felt like maybe he never got a fair shot or a good shake of it. So I think that we'll really have to see how he does. I'm not a Jets fan, so I'm not sure that Sam Darnold is the best. I'm not sure he has the best skills, I guess, but I think that it's possible that he's going to perform well once he's out of the Jets, but I don't know that. We've seen flashes, but flashes aren't enough for a franchise quarterback, and flashes aren't enough for longevity in this sport. And so I think that if all his problem was a dysfunctional organization, then that's going to become very clear to us within the season. And if his problem is just that he doesn't have the talent that everyone thinks he does, then we're going to know that too. But I mean, for the Jets, from a Jets perspective, I think this is great. You get him off of your roster, you send him off. I mean, everyone I saw on Twitter was wishing him the best. I mean, he seems like he's gotten nothing but love from the Jets organization while they traded him away. So I'm hopeful that this will be a good brand new start for him, but cautiously optimistic. I don't know that it actually will be.
Yeah, I agree with Kayla in the sense that this is a lot easier to stomach if it's Lawrence, right? That they're drafting instead of Wilson. Because Lawrence, even though he's not a known, right? We've seen number one overall picks and all this type of prospect fail before. It feels more like a known than Zach Wilson does. And when you've seen those flashes from Sam, I even caught myself doing it. Oh, well, like maybe if they got Devonta Smith and an offensive lineman in the first round, they could kind of piece something together and be an okay offense. But at the end of the day, Sam had to go. A second-round pick is more than I thought they were going to get. There was that reporting a few weeks back that Adam Schefter said they could get a late first from like New Orleans or Tampa Bay. I never saw them getting a first-round pick for him. Personally, I did not think he was first-round pick talent. But it is what it is. And I think you make an interesting point about Teddy Bridgewater too, Kayla, because he's going to have to find a new landing spot. Could that be back up to Zach Wilson in New York? Possibly. This is also his second career quarterback training camp battle with Sam Darnold, which is hard to do when Sam's only been in the league for 4 years. But of course, his rookie year, Bridgewater was on the Jets for about 12 seconds, and then they traded him to move there. Let's talk about the draft, because now it does seem like the first two picks are locked in. We have Trevor Lawrence going one to Jacksonville, Urban Meyer. That's the reason he went there. He's not going there if Trevor Lawrence is the quarterback. Stop with the speculate. It's over. Trevor Lawrence is going to Jacksonville. Sounds like Zach Wilson is going to go to the Jets as well. I'm skeptical only because, I'll admit it, I've never really watched him play. I've seen the highlights on Twitter. I watched some of the pro day, as I mentioned a couple weeks ago. Not a huge fan of the pro day because Sam Darnold can make the same throws. He did make the same throws in the pouring rain on his pro day. But all in all, Joe Douglas clearly found something, and you have to believe in that if you're a Jets fan. And after that's where it starts to get interesting. San Francisco trades up to the third overall pick, clearly with somebody in mind. They would have traded up to number 2 if they could, but the Jets didn't let them do it. And now they're coming to 3 to take either Lance or Fields or Mac Jones, I guess. A lot of people are saying that San Francisco could draft Mac Jones. Personally, if you ask me, I would have drafted Justin Fields. I might even draft Justin Fields over Zach Wilson because I just don't know what he is. We saw Justin Fields beat Trevor Lawrence in the college football playoff, but he also had some poor games as well. If I'm just going to listen to the experts who have contacts, Daniel Jeremiah being one of them, Mac Jones is going to be a San Francisco 49er, Ryan.
I mean, yeah, he is a presumptive favorite right now, but I honestly do think it's smoke. I'm not buying it. And I get why he is talked about there because he does fit the Shanahan system of the pocket quarterback. We saw Matt Ryan, Kirk Cousins had their best years in that system. So he does really fit there. But I think at 3, you have to go with an athlete. And I personally think Justin Fields is the guy at 3. You talked about, he did out-duel Trevor Lawrence. He was hurt that game. He showed a ton of toughness. And when I was watching that game in real time, I think the Jets had already been locked into 2. I was prepared for him to be our quarterback for the next 10 to 15 years. But Zach Wilson shot up the draft boards. He's got a huge arm. He's got a ton of talent. I think he is a lock to go to the Jets, as you talked about. Lawrence, Wilson, I think we are safe to say there. But I do think the 49ers go Justin Fields. He's such a dynamic athlete, and I don't know how John Lynch could turn that down. 4.4 speed, huge arm. And if you do go Mac Jones and he just flat out isn't the athlete, doesn't have the skills of Trevor Lawrence, that's really going to hurt because we've seen before with the Niners, they can't be complacent. And I do give him a lot of credit for trading up. I've not been a Jimmy G fan throughout his tenure in San Francisco. I thought they've got the most out of him. And even then, he collapsed in the fourth quarter of the Super Bowl. He can't stay healthy. So I do like the aggressive move to trade up. We know they are getting a quarterback, but I would assume it'd be Justin Fields. I just think this Mac Jones is a lot of talk. I think it creates some interesting conversation with 4 for Atlanta because I don't think there's any chance they would draft Mac Jones. So maybe, there's a trade scenario there with Atlanta. I think they're locked into Matt Ryan, but with 3, I am going to go Justin Fields to the 49ers. I think it's just a great match for his skill set. Even though he's not a typical pocket passer, he can be. And Shanahan's so creative. He'll find ways to get him on the ground. I'm not worried about that at all. But it is really interesting, Chris, to see all this Mac Jones hype. And I don't think he was ever a guy talked about as a top 3 in this draft until the Niners traded up. So maybe it is they're in love with him, but I don't see how you pass on the talent of Justin Fields right now.
Yeah, well, I have a couple of interesting takes. For one, I think that Zach Wilson could be a mistake. Only because where was he? I don't know. I feel like Zach Wilson came out of left field and then suddenly had a good pro day, and now the Jets are locked in. I
completely 100% agree with you, Kayla. I am scared to death by this kid because he was nowhere. Same with Trey Lance. I completely agree with you.
Yeah, I feel like his name was never up there. It was always Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, and then all of a sudden the Jets are like, we want Zach Wilson from BYU. What? I don't know. I feel like that's a little strange. So I'm concerned about that. I think the Jets could get screwed over again. Secondly, I don't think Mac Jones is going at number 3. I had Trey Lance for number 3. I thought that the 49ers might take Trey Lance. I think that his arm and his style of play and his athleticism would fit into Kyle Shanahan's offense. So I picked Trey Lance at 3, and then I have a bit of a trade going on. I think at 4, okay, so the Falcons, I think, are locked into Matt Ryan. His contract is super hefty until 2022, and I don't really imagine them wanting to pick up another quarterback at the 4 spot. So I see perhaps the Falcons trading with the Patriots. We've seen that Bill Belichick is intense this offseason. He has a vengeance. And so I wonder if the Falcons will trade their 4 to the Patriots for a whole bunch of other stuff, and then the Patriots will take Justin Fields at 4. So this is maybe a conspiracy. I don't know if it'll actually happen. There's a lot of things that have to come into place for this plan of mine to work. But I don't know that the Falcons need a quarterback, and I don't think that they want a quarterback. And so I feel like at 4, they might trade that away and get other things from the Patriots.
Check your phone because I think Mel Kiper is calling you, telling him to lay off his mock draft game. I personally disagree with you guys on the Falcons. I do think they're going to go quarterback, and I think we've seen in the past teams are comfortable taking a quarterback when there's only 1 year left, right? Alex Smith, there's only 1 year left there. They had to trade. There wasn't even. There was more years than that. They had to trade him. Falcons are in a perfect position to let Matt Ryan, play out this season. He'll be 37 at the end of the year and a free agent. Let him go, and then bring in a new guy, Justin Fields, who's now had 1 year under a new coach, Arthur Smith, to learn the book. There's a new coach there. There's a new GM too, I'm pretty sure. I think that they're going to bring in their own guy at 4. They're in a perfect position to do it, and there's no guarantee that next year you're going to be in a perfect position to do it, which is also why I think that San Francisco made this move, is because we are in a position right now to draft a quarterback by making this trade. There's no guarantee that next year we're going to be able to make a trade, right? There's no guarantee that Atlanta isn't – they didn't even have to make a trade to get into a position to draft a quarterback. Next year they might have to give up 2 first-round picks like San Francisco just did to draft their quarterback. So I do think that they're going to go with the 1 remaining, because I really – I guess maybe they go either Fields or Lance. Would the 5th one then go to Detroit? Are they going to draft a quarterback with Jared Goff still on their team? There's a lot of interesting, because the team we know isn't going to draft a quarterback is Cincinnati at 5, probably Miami at 6. Then you have Detroit at 7, and Carolina. We know Carolina's not going to do it at 8. They just traded for Sam Darnold. So now you're starting to fall down. Whoever that 5th quarterback is, whether it's Jones, Fields, or Lance, is going to start falling down that board. Now we're already into the territory of the Cowboys and the Giants. We know they're not going to pick one. The Eagles, they're not going to pick one. So now you just keep going and going and going. And that's where Bill Belichick just sits there and waits for the 5th one to fall to him. Because I think you're right, Kayla. I think that he's probably going to draft the 5th quarterback. But it's possible, if you look at that board, that the 5th one is going to fall all the way to them, because Washington is below them too. And I don't know. I personally could see Mac Jones or Trey Lance going to New England at the 15th pick.
All right, there's a lot to unpack there. First, I want to start with Atlanta because I don't see them moving on from it all. They'd have to eat 40 plus million in dead cap to do so. They have the worst defense in the NFL. They don't have the personnel there. So they need to, be smart here. I would trade out if I were them. It's been reported they're gauging interest, which I think is smart because I do think you're going to see teams willing to jump up. A team that I see is the Washington football team, jumping up to 4. Atlanta needs a ton of help on the defense. You can give them a few firsts. Maybe you give them one of those pass rushers because you're going to have to pay, 3, 4 of them, and you don't want to do that. So you jump up to 4 if you're Washington. And I've been a big proponent in them getting a guy like Trey Lance because I think this is a perfect model to follow, similar to the Dolphins last year. This Ryan Fitzpatrick stopgap. You bring him in to start the year. You have an elite defense. You let him win some games. You let Trey Lance come along, and then you let Trey Lance take the reins. You talked about who he came out of nowhere. He actually, I think, would have been talked about a lot more if he had a season. He did really get screwed with COVID being in the FCS. They're only playing in the spring, and there was no incentive for him to play in the spring. 28 touchdowns, 0 picks in his one season as a starter. And I think the only concern with him, because he has so much talent, is the experience. So if you give him a year or half a year, whatever it is, under Ryan Fitzpatrick, you can make that work. And so that's the move I see. So I do see Atlanta trading out. We know Cincinnati won't take anyone. I'd be shocked if the Dolphins traded back and drafted a quarterback, because if you were thinking about drafting a quarterback, I don't think you trade out of 3. So I think, similar to what you said, Chris, Bill Belichick sitting at 15 here. The dominoes start falling. There's really no one you could see picking a quarterback. You said Detroit. I think they let Jared Goff ride out a year. I don't think he's the future, but they need a ton of help on the defensive side as well. So I see that happening. And then that leaves Mac Jones to the Patriots. The only other team I should mention is the Broncos. I would be a proponent in them drafting a QB. I don't think Drew Lock has shown enough, but he has a ton of talent. You can give him a 3rd year. I wouldn't kill you. I know Vic Fangio is kind of on the hot seat here. Definitely Pat Shurmur. So I would be aggressive if I was them, but I don't think they will be. So that does leave Mac Jones to the Patriots at 15. I think he's a great fit because he's a conservative quarterback. He's not going to be turning the ball over a ton. And I think that's something Bill Belichick really looks at. Cam Newton was obviously re-signed. That's an incentive-laden deal. 1 year flyer, give him another shot with a better offense. They added a ton of weapons this offseason. So I would like the Patriots to draft a guy at 15. I don't see Bill trading up for anyone. And the way that the dominoes fall in my kind of mock draft we're doing here is Mac Jones falling there. So that is kind of how I think the draft's going to play out. I do think there is going to be a team that trades into the top 7-ish to get a quarterback. I think it's Washington personally, and that's kind of how I see the draft unfolding.
Yeah, I don't know that I see the 5th quarterback dropping all the way to the Patriots. I feel like the Broncos might take one. What are they at 9? I think that the Broncos could take one at 9 and take the 5th one there, and then there might not be any more for the Patriots to have. So in my mock draft, I could see Mac Jones going down to the Broncos. And I don't know that necessarily because everybody has Mac Jones going towards the 49ers. Like all of the experts say that is what's going to happen. But I don't know. I feel like he has kind of average athleticism. I think that to pick him over Justin Fields in the top 3 would be kind of crazy to me. I think that would be surprising. I wouldn't expect that whatsoever. And especially with Trey Lance, because of the way his season shook out, it's hard to say how good he's going to be. So he could also be the 5th quarterback. He might drop down too, because people didn't really get to see a lot of what he did this past season. And so that unknown factor, that does he have the experience and can he transfer to the NFL, I think is going to be really tricky. And so it's going to have to be an aggressive and courageous coach who wants to take him on and really mold him and work with him to be their quarterback.
Yeah, I think that this is all interesting. Mac Jones to San Francisco looks more and more realistic when it's interesting because pre the trade, right, nobody had him going 12 to San Francisco, which I think is weird, right? It was like, oh, maybe he could fall to the Patriots. Maybe he can go all the way down to the later part of the 1st round and New Orleans takes him. Nobody had him going 12 to San Francisco. And all of a sudden they trade up to 3 and that's the guy they're going to take him, though they could have gotten him at 12. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But there are 2 guys who we've spoken about, who I think are very interesting. Teddy Bridgewater and Jimmy Garoppolo. Teddy Bridgewater proved last year that maybe he's not the guy from before the knee injury, but he's a serviceable starting quarterback, the definition of a stopgap guy, and he can get a team to 8-8. Carolina had some terrible injuries last year. new offense in the NFL, right? So there was a lot of question marks. He got hurt at one point too, and PJ Walker from the XFL came in. So I think he's a guy that somebody could go out and get. I don't necessarily find a landing spot for him though. Garoppolo, we talk about Mac Jones going to the Patriots. The reason I don't see the Patriots trading up is because they can go get their guy Garoppolo for less, and they also just signed Cam Newton. But it's going to take much less to get Garoppolo away from San Francisco than it is to get the 4 or the 5 away from those teams, Atlanta and Cincinnati. So to me, it's either going to be Mac Jones at 15 or Garoppolo for a second-round pick, maybe some more, to New England for that, because I still don't believe in Cam Newton. I don't think Belichick does either. I think he's only signed there because he didn't want to go into the draft as the desperate guy. What do you think, Kayla?
I don't know. I don't know. So I think I see your point in that if they could have gotten Mac Jones at 12, why would you trade up at 3? I think that makes a lot of sense. And so I do understand that for the 49ers, like, it's so aggressive to have the number 3 pick, and then you're going to go with Mac Jones. I don't know. I feel like that's a little disappointing. But I don't know. I think that the Patriots have not shown that they're that interested in Garoppolo. Like, they haven't made any moves to me that have said that they want to pursue that and that they want to go for him. And so I'm a little hesitant to say that they will. I think that, yeah, they definitely could get less for him instead of working their way up the trade, but they might get they might get a better quarterback if they worked up the trade. So I don't know. I'm hesitant to say that Bill Belichick is gunning for Jimmy Garoppolo and that he really wants him. I haven't seen anything that really shows me that yet.
All right, I want to address something that both you guys said, criticizing the Niners. I am not the biggest Mac Jones guy, but if you have the potential, if you are in love with Mac Jones and you're the Niners and you have a chance to go up and get him, you do it. The value of a franchise quarterback is much more than the 2 first-rounders they gave up. Why risk sitting at 12 and having your guy taken?
Because nobody was going to take him. Everybody had their
You never know how the draft's going to turn out. What if Bill Belichick sits there?
Talked about Mac Jones before the 49ers traded up.
Mac Jones was an afterthought until they traded up.
But guys are quiet in the draft. You don't know what's going to happen. What if Bill calls the Giants at 11 and try to swoop in and take him from the Niners? If you are in love with a quarterback, you have to trade up and get him. And if you're sitting for him at 12, what does that say about you have to be aggressive in this league because it's not worth missing out on. No, but I'm saying if they are, I think it's a move you have to make because the risk is so prevalent because if you have a guy that you identify as the future, you go up and get him every day of the week. You worry about the first round picks later. When you evaluate him and he is your future, you go get him. So that's what I think on that. I love the aggressive move from them because it was clear Jimmy G wasn't going to work out long-term there. And you guys talked about him with the Patriots. I think that's something that we're always going to talk about wherever Jimmy G goes is, can he go back to the Patriots? Can he go back? And I do think that'd be an awesome fit. Obviously, he knows that system. Bill knows him very well. And we'll see what he does there. But I just think, with the contract and the guys in the draft, it is a very, heavy quarterback draft, right? Next year, we're not going to be talking about 5 guys. We're talking about maybe 2 guys. So if Bill Belichick likes Mac Jones or if he falls or one of these other guys, Trey Lance, Justin Fields, I would take him. I wouldn't go with a Jimmy Garoppolo who can't stay on the field. It's that simple. And yeah, that's kind of where I see it. I don't criticize the Niners at all. Just get back to that. I love the aggressiveness from the organization because you don't want to be complacent here and sit at 12 and hope the guy falls to you. Even if no one's talking about him, you don't know what's going to happen. Someone could trade, someone could call, get on the phone, and then you're lost. So I love the move to move up to 3. And I don't think it's going to be Mac Jones. Let me make that clear. I do think that is smoke. But if it is, and that's the guy they evaluated, we'll see what happens. But I give them credit for at least being aggressive and going out and getting him.
Okay, wait. I just want to say one thing. I think that going for number 3 and being aggressive for the 49ers is a good move if you pick somebody like Justin Fields. And so I think that if you pick somebody like Mac Jones, then it was an unnecessary move. That's all I'm saying.
It will only one way to find out, and that's in 18 days when the first round of the draft begins. That's our NFL talk for today. We're going to come back with a little Deshaun Watson, some Draymond Green comments. That's coming from Kayla on the other side of this quick break. Stay with us.
sure to follow WFUV Sports on all of our social media platforms. At WFUV Sports on Twitter, at WFUV_sports on Instagram, and WFUV Sports on Facebook and YouTube. WFUV Sports, home to New York's longest-running sports call-in show and the flagship station of Fordham Athletics.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to One on One. I'm Kayla Wentzel here with Chris Hennessy and Ryan Gregware, bringing you all the updates on the Deshaun Watson situation. So just this week, Nike and Beats by Dre pulled their endorsements from Deshaun Watson as 22 women have come forward in a sexual assault lawsuit against the Texan quarterback. So his lawsuit landed in court for the first time this week as a judge ruled that the women who filed charges under pseudonyms needed to use their real names. So Chris, what are you making of all this? How do you feel about this situation? Like, what do you think is going on?
Well, it gets realer and realer by the day, right? I think at the beginning, which was about 2 or 3 weeks ago now, it was easy to question. It was easy to doubt because there was no criminal charges. And that's, innocent until proven guilty. That's how the system works. But now it gets harder and harder to believe it every single day that this is real now. That there's no other side to this anymore. I don't know how law works, especially in the state of Texas. I have no idea. But to not be allowed to go under the pseudonym and be forced to use the real name is very odd to me. But it's how it's going. And man, this guy went from the number one trade target in the NFL to probably not playing in the NFL next year, if we're being perfectly honest. It's been quite the couple of weeks, and now Nike and Beats polling. I don't know how many endorsements he has, but I'd be surprised if he had any by the time we get to the summer.
Yeah, every day it gets, as you said, more real and real. I remember in the very beginning, people had a gotcha moment because one of the women who came forward was neighbors with the Texans owner, Cal McNair.
No, he is. Busby, the lawyer, is neighbors with Cal McNair.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So people thought that it was, a Texans inside job, all this, but no, this is very real, very, very concerning. I mean, 22 women speaks for itself. There's lawyer Rusty Hardin kind of spoke yesterday. I think it was in a press conference, and I don't think he did a great job helping Watson at all. He kind of justified the pandemic for why he would use 20 plus women to massage him, but wouldn't that make it so you have less interaction? Wouldn't you want maybe 1 to 2 masseuses instead of constantly interacting with all of them? There's a ton of really disgusting details. There was a story in Sports Illustrated the other day with a woman who isn't even coming forward and detailed her story. And it wasn't, she didn't have the unfortunate run-ins with Watson that a lot had, but just very creepy stuff in there. It is really concerning. As you talked about, Nike, I think, suspended. Beats completely ended their relationship. So it's not good for Watson at all. You talked about the names having to come forward. I'm obviously not a lawyer either. I think the only thing, the lawyers for Deshaun Watson, their number one argument is that these women are trying to slander him and take money from him. So they're trying to, I guess, scare them by making their name come public. They'll get a ton of scrutiny. I applaud everyone who's done so. And even if you haven't done so, it's perfectly okay. You're allowed to do whatever you want in this situation if you're one of these 20 plus women. And so I don't think we're done hearing updates. I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of the day, there's new information, new developments, because it keeps changing. And none of these changes are good for Watson. It just keeps getting worse and worse.
Yeah. Well, so I think that this is important too, is that Watson's lawyer said that there were sexual acts between the masseuses and Watson, but that they were mutually desired. And so I think that that word mutually desired, I'm not going to get into all of it, but I feel like to say that like it was desired is not the same as consent. And so I think that that's really a key word here, is that like maybe he thought that the women wanted to be with him. But to say desired, and then also the difference between desire and consent are very different to me.
He did everything but use the word consent. You're 100%.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that that is very concerning. And even more concerning and more brave for these women is that 14 of them came forward with their real names, even though they are receiving death threats and scrutiny, and they still came forward. And so that is not something that women do lightly. And that is not something that they would, I never believed it was like a money grab, but that's especially not something that would happen if they were just doing it for slander, because this is their life on the line. And once you put your name forward, you can't really go much farther than that. People will associate you in this Deshaun Watson sexual assault lawsuit forever, and it becomes part of your reputation as well. And so that is something very hard for women to come forward and to do. And so I think that that further adds validity, that these women are saying, yeah, you may have told us that we can't use a pseudonym, which I feel like is wrong, but I guess I understand from a law perspective that the defense, or that Deshaun Watson's team probably needs to know exactly the charges and exactly the cases and when it happened. But I think that in that so many are willing to come forward and willing to use their real names, it shows that this is serious and that they want Deshaun Watson to be held to justice. And like you said, Ryan, like, why would you go to 30 plus masseuses during a pandemic? People were supposed to keep their circles small, and maybe that's different in Texas, but I know that for everywhere else, you're supposed to keep your interactions with strangers to a minimum. And so the fact that he didn't, and that he constantly had to keep switching, that raises red flags to me. Why do you have to keep going to different masseuses? Is it because the ones you're going to don't want to see you anymore because you are sexually assaulting them? Like, I think that there is a lot to be uncovered here, and especially since they already said that there were sexual acts engaged. So I think that Deshaun Watson is out. I think he's out of the NFL. Well, I hope he's out of the NFL. I hope that they take this severely, and I hope that they ban him and suspend him, because I don't take these acts lightly, and I think that he needs to be held to full justice for them.
100% agree, Kayla. I think as it's gone on, it's gotten just so much worse every single day. And who knows what Monday is going to bring? Who knows what tonight is going to bring? Every single day there's something new with this, and it is concerning. And it's a guy who a lot of us at this station screamed that wanted to be the quarterback of the New York Jets. And now I think that there are very, very few people who would want him to be the quarterback of their team or associated with them in any way, shape, or form. So it's been quite the fall from grace. But you have some NBA stuff for us as well, I see.
I do. So kind of in the similar vein, but not quite as severe. On Twitter a few weeks back, Draymond Green argued that women athletes are doing themselves a disservice in the manner that they are approaching equal pay. And so he wants them to lift up their individual stories instead of complaining, I think was the way that it was worded in this long saga of tweets. And so women's soccer star Megan Rapinoe had much to say to him in response. And she said that she thought Green was not ill-intentioned, but perhaps ill-informed. So Ryan, do you think that Green's comments are being misconstrued here, or is he coming from the wrong perspective?
Right. The thing I'll say about Green is I do think it honestly is clear that he has the right intentions, and he probably didn't, articulate them properly, but I've seen a ton of things. He responded to Rapinoe yesterday in his press conference before the game saying that, listen, if we get at the end of the day where the pay is where it needs to be, that's a win. He said, if Rapinoe's route is the right way to get there, I'm 100% on board. And if it's mine, I'm 100% on board. I also listened to LaChina Robinson, she might still be playing in the WNBA, but she talked about how they've had multiple conversations at length, and he is genuine about wanting to kind of make change and getting the pay to where it needs to be. So I do think that it was misconstrued. Maybe I definitely do think his intentions were in the right place. when that's the case, I'm not going to bash you, but obviously he could have won about it better, kind of, dismissing the WNBA players and kind of ripping them a little bit for complaining. And yeah, I don't really think he went about it the right way, but at the end of the day, he's getting people talking about it, which, I mean, you can argue is good, but at the same time, we shouldn't be talking. We should be, doing action and making it so the pay is where it needs to be.
Yeah, I think you said it well, Ryan. I think while the intentions were to do the right thing, they were not articulated properly. My question would be also, isn't this kind of what we're doing? Like, isn't they're saying like Megan Rapinoe was a brand now. Women's soccer players before Mia Hamm or the 99 team really weren't that. Women's sports in our lifetimes has grown substantially, whether that's at the college level, World Cup level. WNBA has gone from nothing into a legitimate league now. It's hard to say we're getting there because that's a little bit silly to say, but I think this is kind of what we're doing. I don't know. He kind of said, like, stop complaining, but nobody's complaining. Everybody is acting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what Rapinoe said. She was like, all of his tactics, we are trying. We are doing. He's like, has he missed it all? Everyone is still doing what he's saying. And I think it's just, I don't think that he was trying to be ill-intentioned. I don't think that he wants women to have unequal pay. Like, I do believe he wants equality in pay, but I think it's such a man's perspective. And he's like, well, this worked for the NBA, so it should work for you guys. And like, that's just not how it works. It just isn't how it works. Just because it worked for the NBA in like lifting up individual stories to make the NBA popular, that's not going to be the same tactic that's going to work for the WNBA. Because if it was the same tactic, it would have worked already. You know what I mean? Like, it isn't that his tactics are wrong. They are right. But the point is that they are still not working, and it is still not succeeding, because if people wanted women to have equal pay, then they would have equal pay. You know what I mean? Like, I think that while his approach is right, it's also such a man's perspective of, well, it worked for the NBA, so it should work for you guys. But that's just not how it works. It just doesn't go that way because, well, I don't know, because of a lot of other inter factors. But I think that, like, women's soccer and what Megan Rapinoe is saying is that, yes, you're right. And like, why aren't these individual stories working? But I think that that's the greater question of not how come these two different routes aren't working, but why isn't anyone giving women equal pay? I think that kind of, he's picking at a minute problem of the greater issue. And so he said that he was just trying to draw awareness to the situation, which is great. And I think that we do need to have a greater conversation about the WNBA. And I think more NBA stars need to speak out about it. But I think that criticizing the manner that it's coming about is not the type of awareness that people want. And it's not the type of awareness that the WNBA needs.
Yeah, that's why I was so glad that it was Megan Rapinoe who said something, because I think her words weigh so much in that kind of women athletic community, especially in the US, because she, as to Chris's point, she is a legit brand. Obviously, the World Cups, the women's teams had so much success, and they are a real team. They generate real views. To your point earlier about the increasing, interest. I know the women's college basketball tournament had broke the record in views for the Final Four and finals. Those games were awesome. I was glued to my TV watching them. And so I do think that is encouraging. So when it is encouraging, I think it kind of is a little counterproductive that we're talking about this instead of, the actual games, right? Breaking down the Liberty and going over all that stuff. And instead we're having the same conversation I feel like we've been having, and not that it's not an important conversation, but kind of my point earlier, I'd rather we act on it and actually talk about the leagues than talk about getting the leagues to that point. Because I think obviously it's going to take a while. I don't think there's an overnight solution, but I don't know about Draymond Green's approach if it is, the way we're going to get that done.
Especially because there's a new star in New York, right? Sabrina Ionescu from Oregon is here now, and that should be a bigger deal than maybe it is.
Yeah, Ryan, I think that your point is strong too, in that we all keep saying that we need to talk about women's sports more, but I don't know that we've done it on a one-on-one. And that's not to bash anybody. That's not to bash anything. But I think it is to say that everyone keeps talking about how we need to start talking about women's sports versus actually talking about women's sports. We don't actually talk about it. So I think that is a really strong point, and that's something that even on this minute level, even on one-on-one, that we could be working for and we could be working towards and changing how we discuss women athletics.
100%.
So I definitely think that that's something that can be improved and that hopefully we will continue to improve. But kind of continuing on with the Draymond Green drama, on a podcast this week with Kevin Durant, they discussed why they think the NBA regular season is not really that interesting to watch anymore. And so they called out major players like Anthony Davis and Gordon Hayward, who have sat out for like 4 weeks at a time. And with the sheer number of games, they said that it's just very difficult to sustain competitive and interesting basketball. And so, Ryan, as we're at this kind of moment in the NBA season where it's kind of a dog race, do you think that there's any validity to their claims?
100%. I think there definitely is. And we kind of have to right now pick at topics. You know, we're going to talk about NBA in a minute, and there's some local teams, and there are real stories, obviously. It's not like nothing's happening. But we're at the dog days where kind of the interest is wavering. The playoffs are in sight, but they're still a ways away, and we still have some regular season games to play. I think the thing that they talked about is shortening the regular season, but I think at the same time, how is that going to get the players to play? Like, aren't they just going to sit out more? And that would hurt the revenue, obviously, because you're selling less national games, less tickets being brought in. So I do think it's a really interesting conversation. There's been a ton of projected ideas. One that I'm a huge fan of that I have to give credit. This is Bill Simmons' idea, is to add some mid-season tournaments, kind of, you know, give us a break, maybe, you know, halfway through the year and have them count for, you know, maybe double wins. So they really do matter and it gets guys to play. I think that'd be a ton of fun and there'd be a ton of storylines. And the NBA really is a storylines league, right? So, you know, we'd be talking about the Suns getting hot. Can they make a run in the tournament and all stuff like that? And I think stuff like that is what we need to do. I think we need to be creative with the NBA, and Adam Silver certainly is a progressive owner. So I don't think he's going to sit back and let this happen. But at the same time, the players do have so much power where what's the incentive for Anthony Davis to play? You know, they won the title last year. Him and LeBron clearly have rapport. They know how to play together. Why play at 95% when you can sit out an extra 3 weeks, honestly, just to get to 100? There's no urgency for them to play. The seeding really doesn't matter a ton in the NBA. You know, we see every year there's typical 1 seeds that maybe aren't the best teams. They're young. This year, it looks like that'll be the Jazz, the Nuggets a few years ago. And when you have that happen, you know, the teams that kind of coasted along that have the superstars, they'll wake up in the playoffs. And every year there's the conversation with, oh, well, you know, they haven't played enough together. Are they going to be rusty? And we certainly saw that with the Clippers last year, right? Because Kawhi Leonard maybe is the face of low management in this NBA. He sits out a ton of games, and obviously they were bounced by the Nuggets. So I do think something has to be done 100%, because right now I am an NBA fan and I watch maybe a game a day or something like that. But there really isn't that much juice right now. You know, we're past the beginning of the year where guys are up and coming. We know how good teams are at this point, and we're still waiting for the playoffs, and they are still a ways away. So I do think something has to be done. And I do give credit to Draymond and KD kind of acknowledging that, hey, you know, it would benefit all of us if we make the NBA regular season more fun. So I do think something has to be done 100%.
Yeah, I think that what could be done is there could be more parity in the league. I can sit here right now, close my eyes and open them, and it's going to be Lakers, Jazz in the Western Conference and Philly, Brooklyn in the Eastern Conference. And if it's not, that's a big story, right, in the conference finals. So we can snap to the conference finals right now. We pretty much already know what's going to happen. It's going to be Brooklyn, LA in the final, or it's going to be Philadelphia, LA. This year, it's a little bit better than other years because there's Philadelphia and Brooklyn in the East. But, I mean, you talk about that run of championships. It was like, you know, in December, it's like, why are we doing this? We know it's going to be Golden State, Cleveland. Why are we doing this? What's the point? So if you had other teams like, okay, for example, right, the Knicks are like a game in around 500, right? They've been 2 games under, 2 games over at 500 the whole season long. They're the 5 seed. They win 2 more games, they're going to host a freaking series in the playoffs. That's insane. And I think the easy comparison is the NHL because it's the same amount of games, 82 games, 4 7-round series. It's the same amount of games. But there's parity in the NHL. Different teams win. I mean, there's a team that just went back-to-back, 2016, 2017, the Penguins. But other than that, different teams win. Vegas, an expansion team gets to the playoffs. You can't just sit Sidney Crosby or sit Connor McDavid because if you lose that game, if you're Edmonton, then you fall down the standings. There's a lot of parity. Teams are closer together. There's no punishment for Kyrie Irving just leaving the Nets because they're still in second place. He spent 2 weeks away from the team and went to a maskless party at a club and then did it again, and they're still in second place. If Connor McDavid did that, Edmonton would be out of the playoffs because all the teams below them would have actually won, but all the teams below Brooklyn stink. And the Knicks can't beat the one player on Brooklyn. So there's no parity. Every team besides like 4 is awful. And so just let's snap to the conference finals. Let's get it over with because Kyrie Irving clearly doesn't want to play because he knows he doesn't have to.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's true. I mean, teams would not usually sit their best players for 4 weeks or for 2 weeks or whatever because those games matter. But the NBA games don't matter. They're not important to their standings. They're not important to anything because, like you said, nothing is changing. Nothing has changed and nothing is changing. And I think that I personally have never been a huge NBA fan. I'm definitely more of a college basketball fan. And that's because I feel like college basketball players play with intent and they play like something matters to them. Whereas I think the NBA players, they have never played like they care that much because, and that's not to say that they don't care, but it's just to say that they know that it doesn't really matter what they do. Like those teams at the bottom of the list, they know that they're not going to get up there. There's no incentive for them to play as hard as they can because even if they win like 4 games in a row, it doesn't make any difference on their standings, really. It's not going to change things all that much for them. And so that's why I think I've always personally preferred college basketball because they play with an intensity of knowing that their future is on the line. Like with the NCAA tournament, it's so much fun because these teams are playing with everything that they have because they know some of them may never get to play again and some of them may never go to the NBA. And so they know that this is everything. Whereas the NBA, they're arrogant, they're cocky. They know that it doesn't mean anything. It's not going to affect them. They're going to get their paycheck by the end of the day. And I feel like there's such a less love for the sport and that you can see that in players sitting out for 2, 3, 4 weeks. They don't want to be there. They don't love it that much. You know what I mean?
I 100% know what you mean. I'm a big college hoops fan as well. I prefer it to the NBA as well. But the one reason I didn't bring up parity as how we fix the regular season is how are we going to fix parity? I mean, we're not going to let guys sign with teams? Like, I think we're in a super team era and it's going to take drastic changes to change that. And I think kind of right now, as hard as that is to say, because Chris, you said you could close your eyes and count 4 teams. I'd go 6. I'd go Clippers, maybe Bucks. I do think at the end of the day, there is a lack of parity, but I don't know how that fixes the regular season. I think we have to embrace the parity for now and get these matchups to actually count in the regular season. You know, a Clippers Sixers matchup, that should be storylines in that. Doc Rivers coaching against his former team, his former superstars. Obviously, they've done some trades. Tobias Harris, former Clipper. You know, we have to get storylines, but those don't matter if Kawhi is sitting out. Ben Simmons takes a game off. There's no juice in those kind of matchups. And so I understand the parity argument. I agree 100%. It definitely is a problem how you only have a few teams. I'm not going to dispute that, but I don't see how we can solve that into solving the regular season because stars might still sit out. Obviously, we saw LeBron a few years ago play all 82 because he didn't really have a super team in Cleveland. And then we saw a super team in Golden State dismantle him. So I do think that definitely would help, but I don't see a way we can just get these players to stop joining together. That's why I proposed the tournament, the mid-season, because that's the only way I can think of where it incentivizes these stars to play in their games because the parity is a huge issue, but I just don't see a way we can stop it.
Salary cap. It's easy. I mean, there's no luxury tax anymore. I think, you know, there's pros and cons to both the luxury tax and the hard salary cap. I think you're seeing the cons right now in both the NBA and the NHL who have the different formats. The cons are a team like Brooklyn, a team like Golden State can go $1 zillion over the luxury tax when a team like Memphis really can't do that. And they can go they can go buy a championship. Where in the NHL now, the cap is stuck at $81.5 million for the next few years, and it's killing teams at this trade deadline. But so I think you're seeing kind of the cons. But if you really want to push parity, you just create a salary cap that you can't go over, and now every team is. But there's cons to that too. So I don't know. I think that if these games just mattered a little bit more for playoff standing, because they simply don't matter. Look at the Eastern Conference. The Brooklyn Nets are 8.5 games up on the 4 seed with how many games? With a fair amount of games, about 20 games left. There's no chance Charlotte would ever catch them, the 4 seed, right? There's no chance. There's a 0.0% chance. If Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, James Harden do not play a single game for the rest of the season, they're not getting caught. They're going to be in the top 3 seeds. So what's the point? Why are we doing this? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I think that's right in that incentive-wise, it has to be money-based because otherwise, like, I'm not sure that it has to be a tournament because I don't know, maybe this is cynical, but I think that money is going to drive people to either want to be in their games or not. They're not taking any penalty by sitting out 4 weeks. Kyrie is not taking any penalty because he didn't want to play for 2 weeks. I don't think that his salary is changing. But if there was an incentive where if you sit out X amount of time for not an injury or something like that, that you get docked a little bit of money or something, then people might want to play. And that's just a cynical way of the way that I think that NBA players probably just want their money. But I think that that's part of it, is that they know they're getting their huge paycheck at the end of the day regardless. And I think that to create incentive and to create intensity and juice and storylines, you're going to have to include some kind of punishment system of it.
The only flaw I have for that is I feel like teams could just manufacture injuries. Like Kawhi Leonard, when he sat out like 30 games with the Raptors, they made up like calf injuries. They created new injuries for him. The one thing with the cap I'll say is I just feel like guys will take less to join up together. I don't see, there's such an appeal to join together and to create super teams and to win a title, which is the goal for most players. I think at the end of the day, I think you're seeing that I think that they will kind of find ways to get around that offload salary. And I don't know how that helps the NBA in that aspect because guys are making so much anyway off the field, right? The stars in this league are so big. Obviously, it's a star-driven league that I don't know if that is the benefit and if that is the solution, but they could toy around with that for sure. I think it'd be interesting to see if guys would take less. Like, would Kyrie take 18 mil a year instead of a max to join the Nets? Stuff like that. We have seen KD do that because luxury does, it does crawl up on you a little bit. But for sure, I think that is an interesting solution. And if they were to do that, which I don't think they will, because that would limit spending and would limit the money in players' pockets, I don't think they'd ever go for that. I think it probably would help just at least a little bit.
Very interesting stuff from Draymond Green. Kayla, thank you very much. We'll be back with some more NBA talk after this short break. Stay with us.
To support the WFUV Sports Department, visit support.wfuv.org to become a member or make a one-time donation. WFUV Sports, home to New York's longest-running sports call-in show and the flagship station of Fordham Athletics.
Commemorates WFUV and WFUV HD, New York. Listener-supported public media from Fordham, the Jesuit University of New York. Right here on 90.7 FM, WFUV.org, and WFUVSports.org. New York's longest-running sports call-in show on 90.7 FM, WFUV.org, and WFUVSports.org.
Welcome back, one-on-one here on WFUV 90.7, WFUV Sports on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and wherever you are finding us tonight. Ryan Gregware with me. I'm Chris Hennessy. We're going to talk a little NBA here at 12:11 here on Sunday morning. The Knicks with a really big win last night. Really big win. It keeps them in the 8th spot and pushes them to a game within 500. And I think RJ Barrett was fantastic last night, and that's how they win that game. And that's what you needed coming into this season, more than getting to 500. And if they finish 36-36, which looks pretty realistic right now, that's a great season. That's better than you were expecting. But I think the most important part was the development of RJ Barrett, and you've seen that very in every game, but especially last night against Memphis.
Yeah, it was a huge win for the Knicks. It looked bleak. They were down 4, I think, a minute left, and RJ has a huge bucket to tie it with, I think, 8-ish seconds left. They're able to stop John Morant. Huge win in overtime. Julius Randle hit some huge shots, and it was one the Knicks really needed, Chris. You know, they have scuffled since the All-Star break. It has been a little concerning. They're 7-9, and I think the huge thing you have to look at is their inability to close out these games. In 7 of those 9 losses, they've literally had a shot to tie or win the game. So in a game like this, where that could have followed the trend we're seeing, they're able to close it out. They got up to 4, I think, in the standings, and now they're down to 8. So they really are clawing. I'd obviously prefer if they are able to, as a Knicks fan, get to that 6th spot and not have to do the play-in series, because I think that is very dangerous when you have some teams lurking like the Heat, the Celtics, similar records. You don't want to match up with those guys and have to beat them 2 straight. So they keep chugging along. I think we know what this team is at this point. It's not some crazy playoff team. It's just a solid 500 basketball club. Tom Thibodeau is going to get the most out of his guys. That's what he's doing, especially RJ Barrett. And I don't think they're world beaters, but they, I think, deserve a spot in the playoffs. It gets tough here. I think they have 6 games. They have the 6th hardest schedule remaining. So it's going to get tough, and they need to find ways to steal games. They've had some chances to steal games versus the Nets. They haven't been able to do so. The Bucks, the Celtics. So they have to keep chugging along. They have to stack wins because it's going to get close. And I don't want to have to worry, late into the season about play-in tournaments. I just want to see the Knicks in the playoffs at the end of the day.
Yeah, 100%. Their schedule does get tough. They also have games against teams that, if they want to move up out of that play-in series, they're going to need to beat. Like they have a game against Charlotte on April 20th and the next day against the Hawks on April 21st. And then they have the Bulls at the end of the month of April. Those are big games. You're talking about a 2-game swing in this conference where, such few games really separate everybody, right? Well, Charlotte's at 8.5 back of Brooklyn, and the Knicks are at 10.5. So 10 games separate hosting a playoff series and being the 8th seed in the play-in. And it's unfortunate, really the run that they've gone on, where they lost by 2 to Boston, 2 to Brooklyn. They got crushed by Dallas, but they lost by 1 to Philadelphia, 3 to Philadelphia, and 5 to Brooklyn. And those are 5 games that against very good teams too. Boston's had a tough season, but Philadelphia and Brooklyn are 2 of the 2 best teams in the East. Those are tough games to lose. But they're games you expected to lose at the beginning of the season. But now, with the team that you're putting together, with the shot to potentially win the game, that first Nets game with the ref, that was a whole thing with Julius Randle. It's been a tough couple of weeks. It really has. But they're able to right the ship. And I think that's why you hired Tom Thibodeau in the first place. I think he's not going to win you an NBA championship with this. He can with a great roster, but not with this roster. And he's going to win you games you don't necessarily deserve to win. He's going to keep you close with teams you never thought you'd be close with. and get you to the playoffs, and you might lose in the play-in or the first round. But all in all, it's a far more successful season than I'm sure you thought, certainly I thought, was coming into this year.
Yeah, this was a classic like Tom Thibodeau win. Like they don't get this win if it's last year. Even Mike Miller down the stretch, they don't get this win. And no, I didn't expect this at all going into the year. I thought this was another lottery year. I did love the direction that they were going with Leon Rose. I like some of the picks. I like how he made an effort to go young instead of, get caught in no man's land like they're so used to going, spending huge on free agents. Obviously, Julius Randle has worked out, been, I think, the surprise of the season. He'd be I'll tell you right now, I'm biased, but he'd be my vote for, most improved player, what he's been able to do. But for everything he has done in this second half of the year, he has slowed down a little bit. He had a triple-double last night, which was great, but he hasn't been able to close out the games. And I think that is the big issue with this team. They just don't have a closer, like a veteran guy who give him the ball up 20 seconds. He'll get you a bucket to ice the game and put it away. And I think that's why they have lost some of these games, because they haven't had the guy to hit the shots. And the other reason is, as unfortunate as it is to say, maybe teams have figured out kind of the Knicks recently. We've seen teams switching to a zone in crunch time, and the Knicks aren't able to really capitalize there because they don't have a guy who can threaten on the drive that can also pass out kind of efficiently. RJ obviously is awesome on the drive. He capitalized last night, but when you've guys like Alfred Payton and Reggie Bullock, who are nice passers but can't drive the way RJ can, it creates issues. And we saw, I think, the Nets, Bucks, and Celtics all switch to a zone down the stretch in some of those crunch time games that you talked about that the Knicks barely lost, and some on last second shots by RJ and some on Julius Randle. So I do think they have to figure that out a little bit. You're not going to find a closer on the free agent market this late in the game. And Tom Thibodeau is going to get the most of his guys. So they have to ride it out. They have to win these games because you've come so far. You've shown so much progress. I never expected to be in this position. But now that we are in this position, Chris, I have expectations. I think this team should be a playoff team with the way the East is shaping out currently. And I would be disappointed if they weren't able to make it, especially because all year, obviously they've been hovering, 2 up, 2 down, the 500 mark, but they've been in the playoffs for a while now. I don't remember the last time that they fell to the 9 seed or anything like that. They were at 4 for a while, as we mentioned. So I think they need to keep chugging along, and they need to steal some of these games because, as you said, going into the season, you never expect to pull out any of these wins. And even now, it's not like you're going to be favored in any of these, but you need to steal wins because you beat up on the bad teams, which is what Tom Thibodeau and this team does, but you need to steal some games along the way to really make a name for yourself. I would say they stole last night's game versus the Grizzlies, but that's no world beater. They should have beat the Grizzlies anyway. It would have been a really tough game to lose, fall to 3 under for the first time in a while. So huge win yesterday. I still have my reservations on this team, but I do have expectations that I want to see this team in May. I want to see them in the playoffs. I think they deserve it. They've had a great season overall, and I do think it would be really unfortunate if they were kind of slowed down at the end of this and weren't able to make it.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think that there is an expectation to make the playoffs, even if it is the play-in round. It'd be fun to see the orange and blue playing in May for the first time since Carmelo was here, which is a sneaky long time ago now. Shifting south to Brooklyn, Kevin Durant comes back after another injury-related absence. 19 minutes off the bench, goes a perfect 5 for 5 with 17 points and a thrashing of New Orleans. They have a couple days off after that. They'll take on LA. They have already taken on LA. As you hear this, we don't know how the game progressed. That's at 8:30 on Saturday night. That will be obviously without LeBron and AD as they're both still hurt. So game that game that Brooklyn should win. All 3 guys are back now. There should be no more birthday parties. There should be no more any of this ridiculousness that we've dealt with the Brooklyn Nets for the last 6 weeks. 3 guys, they're going to play the games, they're going to win the games, and they're going to be the 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. If there's another injury, it's hard to say I would start to get concerned, though, because you just watched Kyrie beat the Knicks single-handedly. So it's impossible to say you're concerned with this team, but finally all 3 of them are back. Yay.
No. I mean, I don't like the Nets from a team perspective. I don't like how they built the team, but I'm not worried at all because you mentioned the big 3. They've only played 7 together. They'll be finally start playing these games together, dismantling of the Pelicans the other day. But they are deeper than just these 3. Joe Harris, one of the best 3-point shooters in the league. You saw KD the other day. He's a guy who's going to spin it. He's going to be real. He's not going to throw shade and kind of be wrong. He said that Obviously, Clay and Steph Curry are the best shooters he's played with. He said Joe Harris is right there. So that tells you the kind of the player he is. And obviously, you have the buyout market, which they got so much better. They add legit bigs, LaMarcus Aldridge, Blake Griffin. They still have Jeff Green, who's kind of had a career renaissance here. Nick Claxton, Landry Shamet. They have so many weapons. They're so good offensively. I think the one thing that people are looking at as concern is just, the defense isn't there. But this might be the best offensive team ever assembled, even better than those Warriors teams because of all the different ways they can get buckets. And so I think that offensive firepower will just be too much for anyone else. The only other thing that, we talked about guys sitting out in the last segment, and I certainly think that is a kind of a concern, right? They haven't really played together yet. They won't be in a groove going to the playoffs. Obviously, guys are going to take their games off here and there. We need to see how you kind of play together. But there's so much talent on this team that I think you can overlook it. I remember when they got Harden, some people weren't happy about it because the classic "there's only one ball" argument came to play. But we realize in the NBA, every time you have that argument, stars will figure it out. These guys will figure it out. Great win over the Pelicans. KD, it really is remarkable. Like, we forget he's coming off the torn Achilles. Porzingis, who's younger than him, probably around the same height, both 7-footers, still really isn't in his groove, especially defensively. And KD kind of just didn't miss a beat. Obviously, this was a hamstring injury that he was sidelined with for 23 games, but he comes back from that 17 points in 19 minutes. They finally overtake the Sixers for that 1 seed. I feel like they've been trailing them all year, and I think it's fitting that in a game KD came back, they overtake them. I wouldn't expect them to fall anywhere below number 1 the rest of the year. So no, Chris, I'm not concerned with the Nets at all. And I think that they are on a collision course to the finals. And I don't think anyone in the East will have any chance at stopping them.
Yeah, let me just make a quick correction there. It looks like LeBron might be playing. The injury report doesn't have him listed as out. James Harden will be out tonight, or he was out tonight. So once again, just tick it off on the no side on what did the three acquisitions play together, because James Harden will be out tonight, as is Landry Shamet. There's no reason to be concerned about Brooklyn because they've proven time and time again that without 1, 2, or I think with all 3 they did lose a couple of games, but without 1 or 2 of them, the remaining guy can win. There was the James Harden game against Phoenix, I think it was, earlier in the season. There's Kyrie going for 40 against the Knicks the other night. And we haven't seen it with Kevin Durant because he's been the one who's really been out. But, we all know who Kevin Durant is. We know he can go out and win a basketball game single-handedly. None of us have a doubt about that. So if you get to the playoffs and one of these guys is still hurt, there's not going to be a concern that they're going to get bounced early. Now, I, as the cynical non-NBA fan I am, do think that they're going to get to the playoffs and they're magically all going to be healthy again. But we'll have to see. It was a very quick Knicks-Nets NBA segment, catching you up to date. The Nets just played the Lakers. The Knicks with a big win against Memphis last night. So we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back. Another quick segment, NHL. Kyle Palmieri's a New York Islander, and there are some serious COVID concerns as we wind down with about 15 games to go in the National Hockey League. We'll take a quick break. Ryan Gregware and I will be back in about 2 minutes.
To support the WFUV Sports Department, visit support.wfuv.org to become a member or make a one-time donation. WFUV Sports, home to New York's longest-running sports call-in show and the flagship station of Fordham Athletics.
Be sure to check out all of our latest podcasts on WFUVsports.org or wherever you get your shows, including NFL Friday, Nosebleeds, Pick and Pod, 5 on 3, College Gridiron, and FUV FC. Also, our newest edition, Off the Air, diving into the station's legacy with its most prominent alumni. WFUV Sports, home to New York's longest-running sports call-in show and the flagship station of Fordham Athletics.
Welcome back into One-on-One, New York's longest-running sports call-in show here on WFUV 90.7, WFUVsports.org, and everywhere else you might find us. Ryan Gregware is here. I'm Chris Hennessy. We're going to talk about the NHL with the trade deadline a little bit less than 48 hours away. Monday at 3 p.m. is when that hits, and the Islanders and Lou Lamoriello, they go out and make a move early. They said, I'm not dealing with the Monday madness. Go and get Kyle Palmieri, one of the two biggest fish on the market. They go and get him, along with Travis Zajac, two guys Lou Lamoriello acquired when he was the GM of the Devils, for a first-round pick and two low-level prospects. I love the trade. I mean, there's no way not to. The Islanders go out and get somebody they need, and they pay the price, and they're now 1-1. Palmieri and Zajac haven't been too visible yet in the two games that they've played, but that time will come. Pajot took a while to get settled in, and now he's one of the better players on the team from last year. So your thoughts, Ryan, initially on a trade that is very good, in my opinion, for the Islanders.
Yeah, obviously you're the Islanders fan here, so I'll tech to you for that. I saw that they're paying 50% of the salary the Devils going forward, which I think is key because you talked about earlier, the cap in the NHL is so tight that it's nice that you're able to pick up some salary there. And I mentioned this in the preview, but I don't know, like you talked about how you love this trade, and I always just love when my teams go for it. The first round pick, that's irrelevant if they make noise, right? And they win it all. You worry about that later. So to get two guys that are going to make a big impact for your team, I think is big. My question for you is, I was wondering, because I was reading some mixed reports, do you think the Islanders are done here, or do you think they're going to make another move before this deadline?
Well, yeah, I did think they were done. So you mentioned the 50% retained salary. I'll bring this back to answer your question. So the Islanders have zero cap space, like a donut. But their captain, Anders Lee, gets injured. He's getting paid $7 million a year. When you put a guy in the IR in the NHL, long-term injured reserve, you clear that salary. So that salary is available to be used. So now the Islanders have just under $8 million in cap space. They go and trade for these two guys. They eat up about 4.5 to 5 of it. So now you have just under $4 million left. The max amount you can retain as a trading team is 50%. The biggest fish on the market all season long has been Taylor Hall. He signed a 1-year, $8 million contract in Buffalo, and he's certainly going to get traded because Buffalo was terrible. If they retain 50%, the Islanders, technically speaking, cannot afford it. So they would have to trade somebody on their NHL roster to Buffalo. Considering they just gave up their first-round pick, you would have to give Buffalo – you'd have to pay up for Buffalo to take that salary away from you, and they just gave up their first-round pick. So I personally don't see it happening. I would have loved, right, if they had traded the first-round pick and a guy like Leo Komarov or Andrew Ladd away to Buffalo to clear that cap space and let Taylor Hall come in here. But it doesn't look like that's going to happen. There are some reports that Lou Lamoriello has been talking to Buffalo still, and he's trying to figure out a way for it to happen. But I would think Buffalo would want a team with a first-round pick this year and where they don't have to retain all 50% of the salary to trade with. So it feels like Taylor Hall is out for the Islanders, but I hope I'm wrong. That'd be quite the pickup for sure. My only concern with this trade and with performing a Taylor Hall trade for whichever team does that is you're entering an expansion draft without a first round pick. What we saw from the Vegas draft is they were willing to take your first round pick from you in that 2017 NHL draft in return for taking the lowest guy on your totem pole. So for the Islanders, they gave Vegas their first round pick, which turned into defenseman Eric Brandstrom. And they took Mikhail Grabovski, who was like not even on the Islanders anymore. He was getting paid like nothing, and they just took him, and then he never played for Vegas. Eric Brandstrom then actually got traded from Vegas to Ottawa, and Mark Stone did whatever. I can go on and on. But now you have a situation where they don't have that first round pick. So you're going to have to give up 2 or 3. They only have 3. They have 3 second round picks in the next 2 years. 2 of them belong to Colorado. Give up 2 or 3 of those to Seattle. Excuse me, I almost said Vegas. To Seattle for them to take the guy you want, or you just leave them open and let them take either Josh Bailey or Scott Mayfield. That's where I see the expansion draft going now. Losing that first round pick leaves open the opportunity that Josh Bailey or Scott Mayfield aren't on the Islanders next year, which would suck. But I mean, overall, it was a very good trade for the Islanders.
I mean, yeah, so I get your point with the expansion thing. I think that's really interesting too, to protect players. But at the end of the day, like, you're focused on this year right now. And if you are able to win this year and make noise, obviously they're tied for first in the East. So they're real contenders. And if you can do that, I think it's easier to stomach. We see it in sports all the time. Teams trade a ton of prospects. They empty the farm for like a half-year rental. Not saying this will be the case here. And if you win, it's worth it at the end of the day. So I do think in that aspect, you worry about that when you get there. Obviously, the future is concerning. You talked about Taylor Hall a minute ago, and I don't know. For me, it looked like they chose, like it wasn't like they were never going to get both. It seems like they chose Palmieri over Taylor Hall, kind of. It doesn't seem like it would be a 2-for-1, especially with the cap difficulties you talked about. So at the end of the day, do you think that was the right move to choose kind of what they did instead of going after a Taylor Hall?
Yes, only because you got the extra player, and Travis Zajac can perform for this team, penalty kill wise, take faceoffs. He's just an all around. He's kind of like a utility infielder pickup, really, is what he is. He can do a lot of things offensively. He can play on the power play, and overall, he's going to be a positive for this team. Now, Taylor Hall is a better player than Kyle Palmieri, and he's better than Palmieri and Zajac put together, probably too. But I don't know what that package looks like. I do think this is the right move because that also gets them in the building earlier. You're competing against less teams. A lot of teams are going to want Taylor Hall, including Carolina, Florida, and pretty much any team with $4 million in cap space is going to go and try to trade for Taylor Hall right now. So, but other than those two, it looks like it's going to be a pretty bleak deadline because of the lack of funds for most of these teams, which is unfortunate because the NHL trade deadline is a lot of fun. We're going to move on to an unfortunate story in the NHL. The Vancouver Canucks have a lot of COVID positives. They have over 20 people on the from the roster, coaches included, are tested positive for COVID. Over half their roster, including both their goaltenders, are on the COVID list. They had their first day in a week on Thursday or Friday, where they did not have a single new positive test, which is a step in the right direction. But it's the Brazilian variant. People are struggling with this. And Deputy Commissioner Bill Daley says they want to get him in this week. I don't think so. I mean, this is not good. This is worse than the Titans was. This is worse than the Sabres. This is worse than the Marlins. This is really, really bad.
Yeah, I think this probably is, you just mentioned the other teams, the other sports. This probably is the worst that it's been. And before I ever talk about like the impact on the team, will they come back? When will they play? I think of like just the players. I hope they're all okay. It was reported that a few were in rush shape before. Brazilian variant, I'm not going to lie, I didn't even know that there was a Brazilian variant before I kind of looked into the story. So that's something you never want to have to deal with. I hope that everyone's family as well from the, the players, everything like that. I hope that's all taken care of. And then you talked about, when they will come back, and it's supposed to be next Thursday, I believe. I don't see any chance that happens. I think that was being way too aggressive, especially you mentioned both their goaltenders. And I think there's a lot that's at play right now. They need to make sure, you talked about how they didn't have any positive tests for the first time. I think that's crucial. But we've seen in other sports where a few days goes by and then another guy and then another guy. So I think from that sense is why you have to play it safe here and you have to kind of wait it out a little bit. It really is unfortunate. 45 postponements for the NHL season. Obviously, it's not comparable to the NFL, but they had a few postponements, but they made up every game. The NBA, I think, is in probably a little better shape than the NHL. I'm curious, do you think this is just circumstantial, or do you think there's like a real reason that the NHL has had such problems?
Well, I think they're all different, right? Every outbreak is a little bit different, and in this one, the team investigated it and they said nobody did anything wrong. It was just somebody got it. Just it happens. And I think the NHL is in a really tough situation because you look at there's two different countries, right? Toronto Raptors are playing in Florida, and so are the Toronto Blue Jays. But the 7 Canadian NHL teams are playing in Canada, and the vaccine rollout in Canada is significantly slower than it is here. You mentioned you and I got ours yesterday. There are people who are in their 60s in Canada who don't have their first shot yet. The Yankees just held a COVID vaccine hub basically for their whole team. Everybody got vaccinated the other day, and that led to Gio Urshela being on the IL. But they all got their vaccine the other day. And now you look at these Canadian teams. This is the second Canadian team to enter the COVID protocol. They had done so well up in Canada until about 3 weeks ago when Montreal entered the list. So I think it's a little bit of both. I don't necessarily know the NHL has done anything wrong that's led to this amount of COVID pauses. But the Devils were really bad at the beginning of the season. They had 18 guys on the list at the beginning of the season, and they were all able to come back. I think that was a little bit more asymptomatic than this one is. This is really, really bad. And you're getting to the point of the season where it's going to be hard to reschedule games because the last day of the season is May 10th. Their last game is May 8th, so that's 2 days. Great. You got to schedule it you got to play a game every day in the month of May. I personally right now don't see a way they get to 56 because I don't know how you can start playing when there's still positives on the team. Maybe they'll find a way. I don't know. This is a very, very fluid situation for sure.
I mean, I don't think you can find any way to play. I think you might have to eat it with these games. And I don't know how that'll affect the schedule and the playoffs and the seedings. And that's nothing, you never want to deal with that. But if guys are still testing positive, if there are still outbreaks, you can't risk everything because then you could do a whole blow up. You could risk postponing the season. I remember in the MLB right off the bat with the Marlins thing, and they played with kind of COVID, right? They played the Phillies with COVID, and people were calling for the season immediately be canceled. They were the first league that really came back. So that was significant there. And I think the NHL has to be smart here. You talked about the vaccine rollout in Canada, which is really interesting and unfortunate, I guess, for them because they'll probably have to wait longer. And I just think at the end of the day, you have to put safety in the front of everything with COVID and with the players. And, if it means you can't make up every game, then you have to do it. If it'll get you also to the end point, because the risk of playing games in the regular season where there could be potential COVID is way bigger than, kind of canceling. And then hopefully we get a champion when it's all said and done.
Yeah. And this is a team that's not going to make the playoffs either, right? The North Division is for the most part set with Toronto, Winnipeg, Edmonton, and Montreal. Vancouver's probably not going to make the playoffs. They could have made a run for sure. They could have made a big acquisition at the deadline and tried to make a run, but now they're not going to do that for sure. I don't know. I mean, it doesn't feel worth it. It just feels like we should reschedule the games. We should make sure Toronto, Edmonton, Montreal, Winnipeg play 56 games, whether it's against each other, whether it's against Ottawa and Calgary, whatever. Just get those 4 teams to 56 games, get them to the playoffs, and leave Vancouver out of this, which is unfortunate because you want those guys to be able to play. You want them to earn their money, and there's no fans in Canada, so there's no fan revenue. There's no incentive for the owner to play the games, but financially at least. I don't see a reason to push this. I really don't. I think I don't know. It's very early to say they're out for the season because there is a month left. But if we get another 7 to 10 days of this, it seems like everything is starting to trend in that direction, even though Bill Daly has said they're going to play all 56 and they're going to come back next week. I mean, yeah, maybe we'll look like idiots in a couple of days, but right now it doesn't seem right. So there's just a lot going on in the NHL. Tyler Mooney and I talked a lot about this on 5-on-3 this week, and we got a little bit more into the Islanders trade. Actually didn't happen when we did that podcast. So if you want to hear all our reactions to the Islanders trade, come back for this week. But the Rangers beat the Islanders on Friday night 4-1, which was a tough loss for the Islanders. Big win for the Rangers, though. They're climbing up the standings, and Boston and Philadelphia have really struggled. And the Rangers are 2.5 games out of the playoffs right now. They're 5 points out, and they can make a run. So if you're not a hockey fan, root for Islanders, Rangers in the first round. Islanders get to first place, Rangers get to fourth place. If you want to see my blood pressure go up, just root for that. It's 1 o'clock in the morning here on Sunday, April 11th, Masters Sunday. We're going to get to that in a little bit. But first, we are going we're going to have Nick DeLuca come on to the program. He's going to talk to Michael G. Long. He's an author who has written about Jackie Robinson. Thursday is Jackie Robinson Day. So DeLuca is going to take over for us for about 15 minutes. We'll come back in about 20 to 25 minutes, and we'll have some more headlines from Kayla. So stick with us. Nick DeLuca, Michael G. Long coming up after this break.
Be sure to check out all of our latest podcasts on WFUVSports.org or wherever you get your shows, including NFL Friday, Nosebleeds, Pick and Pod, 5-on-3, College Gridiron, and FUV FC. Also, our newest edition, Off the Air, diving into the station's legacy with its most prominent alumni. WFUV Sports, home to New York's longest-running sports call-in show and the flagship station of Fordham Athletics.
One-on-one, New York's longest-running sports call-in show. Pleasure to be joined by the author and editor of 3 books on Jackie Robinson: First Class Citizenship, The Civil Rights Letters of Jackie Robinson, Beyond Home Plate, Jackie Robinson, On Life After Baseball, and Jackie Robinson, A Spiritual Biography. Michael G. Long, thank you so much for taking some time today. How are you?
Nick, good to be with you. I'm doing well, thanks.
So let's get into Jackie Robinson a little bit, and your writing in particular was pretty interesting to me because it explores perhaps a different side of Jackie Robinson from what is given to perhaps the general population. How is Jackie Robinson different from the way he is portrayed traditionally in popular culture?
Well, I think of the Jackie Robinson books that I grew up with. I also think of the way Major League Baseball has celebrated his legacy and just the way that he's presented in pop culture. And when I think of those things, I see Jackie Robinson who's frozen in 1947, especially on April 15th, 1947. This is the day that he shatters the color barrier in Major League Baseball. He is soldiering non-violently. He's turning the other cheek. He's brushing the dust off his uniform and just moving on. He's not responding directly to all the racist taunts and jeers that come his way. And in this sense, Robinson is non-threatening to us, and especially in white America. He's safe. He's a figure who is not hitting us back. And we laud this Robinson, I think partly because he is so safe and he is so non-threatening. And so we've frozen him there, I think, for that reason, just as we've frozen Dr. King at the Washington Monument, at the Lincoln Memorial on August 28th, 1963. King is less threatening there than he is at other points of his life. And the same is true of Robinson in 1947. Now, the Robinson we depict in the book, Nick, is a little different from that.
You mentioned his first season, 1947, and many of his teammates opposed to integration, supporting a league-wide walkout, and some of the craziness that went on in that first season that we seem to pay more attention to. What was your understanding of that season and some of the challenges that Jackie had to face?
One of the challenges he had to face was just the lack of support among his teammates and among the Dodgers organization. When he showed up in the locker room, they didn't even have a locker for him. They weren't quite sure that the great experiment, as it was called, would work. In fact, they put his jersey on a peg. And not only did they do that, they gave him a really high number. So I don't know if this is still true, but back in 47, the lower numbers were really the ideal numbers that people aspired to. These were the numbers that people liked. And so number 4 was available that year. Number 2 was available that year. One of them went to Duke Snider, a great rookie. But Robinson got number 42. That was a really high number. It's not something that one aspired to in 1947. So Robinson took that as a challenge. He took the absence of a locker as a challenge. He made a number out of 42. We sure as heck didn't know it before Robinson, but we sure do know what 42 means now. So that was one challenge, the lack of support from the organization. And then he didn't have support among his teammates either. There's this great myth about Pee Wee Reese walking over to Robinson early in 1947 and putting his arm around Robinson. And according to Rachel Robinson and a contributor, Jonathan Eig, who's written a great book about Muhammad Ali, by the way, that never happened. In fact, people just on the team just didn't do that to Robinson in early 47. They kept their distance. So Robin faced that. That was another challenge. Still another challenge was the very direct, explicit racism directed at him by other players and teams. And here I'm thinking of the Philadelphia Phillies and their manager, Ben Chapman, who hurled every possible racist word at Robinson in early 47. I mean, it was brutal. So Robinson faced that challenge as well. And then there were the fans who despised his color, and some of them sent death threats to him. So he would go out in the field and face these death threats. So those are just some of the challenges he faced early in 47.
With all of those challenges and having to navigate such almost an unfathomable situation, he had to manage the anger and the emotion of perhaps not being able to retaliate in a way that would make sense for a number of other people. How did Robinson control his anger and just deal with the entire situation that he was put in to be able to abide by Branch Rickey's rules and the agreement that had allowed him to play on the team going into 47?
It almost seems unimaginable for him to manage this. But let's just go back to the Phillies for a second. When he heard Ben Chapman and the team and the bench hurl all those words in his direction, he says in later years that he felt like throwing down his bat, marching over to the dugout, and taking what he calls his despised black fist and pummeling those white sons of you-know-whats. He doesn't do that, remarkably to me, but he felt that. And when he felt that, he swallowed it. And he turned all that, says one of my contributors, into muscle, which is really interesting. That's a great image, isn't it? So you take all that racism that's coming your way and you take it inside and you turn it into muscle. And the contributor means physical muscle. But I can also add that he turned it into spiritual muscle as well. He turned it into strength and courage and athletic prowess on the diamond, right? So this is a guy who turned that resentment into muscle that resulted in Hall of Fame statistics, right? Amazing to me that he performed at such a high level while he's trying to swallow all those threats and face all those threats that are coming at him from all directions. The other thing he did, and I know Fordham is a Catholic university, is to go to his room late at night when he got home after the game. He would kneel by his bedside and ask God for strength and courage. And according to Rachel, he did this every night. So he turned to God for help as well. These weren't easy times for Robinson. He was not naturally peaceful. He was not nonviolent, as he put it. He was inclined to strike back. One of his teammates from the Negro Leagues said that he had a temper like a rattlesnake. So let's not imagine for a second that this was an easy time.
Talking to author and editor of 3 books on Jackie Robinson, Michael G. Long. You mentioned a little bit of what I wanted to get to next, but Jackie Robinson, the player, 6-time All-Star, league MVP in 1949, Rookie of the Year, is how great of a baseball player that Jackie Robinson is, mixed up with all of the things that he went through and his legacy of being a player that broke the color barrier. Does he go underappreciated as just how great of a baseball player he was?
I think so. I think that Robinson could have made it into the Hall of Fame just for breaking the color barrier. But that isn't even mentioned on his plaque, I don't think. I might be wrong about that. I have to go back and read it. But think about this. He gets death threats by mail, right? So when he goes out to the field, he's imagining that somebody is in the stands ready to take him out. Can you imagine fielding under those circumstances? Can you imagine winning the MVP? Can you imagine becoming the Rookie of the Year, 1947, right? And then throughout his career, and these racist taunts and jeers don't stop in 47. Racism didn't disappear after 47. They continue until he leaves in 56. Throughout his career, he builds these statistics, 313 or 311 or 313, he bats. And then you mentioned the other awards as well. Yeah, when you combine that with the history of shattering the color barrier, and then with the racism that came his way, I think his baseball career is underappreciated. It's one thing to build Hall of Fame statistics, but it's quite another thing to compile those statistics under such enormous pressure.
I think there's a widely accepted understanding of Jackie Robinson and who he was and what the story is. Is there something that we should know as someone who has followed and studied him more closely about his legacy that perhaps goes underreported or that we don't know?
I think one of the things that sometimes gets lost in the mix of sports is that Robinson transformed not only the rosters of Major League Baseball, so that when he leaves in 1956, 5.6% of all players on Major League Baseball rosters are Black players. But he also transformed the game. And so what Robinson did, according to George Vesey, a longtime sports writer for the New York Times, who contributes to the book, is to transform the game itself. He injects blackness into Major League Baseball. And Vesey makes the case so that when we see a runner taking that extra long turn at first base, thinking about going to second, and when we see them dance between the bases, when we see that hard slide, when we see somebody steal home plate, that's Jackie Robinson ball. He transformed the game. And unfortunately, that's been sort of squelched and tamped down by analytics. But beginning in 47, he really brought some excitement to the game that simply wasn't there before. I think that's sometimes forgotten as well.
It's obvious to celebrate his achievement and his greatness, but I think one of the most important things that is about just Jackie Robinson's legacy in general regards what we can learn from him. What do you think that you and I and everyone should learn from the Jackie Robinson story?
Well, I think we should learn that there's great virtue in impatience. Robinson was not a patient figure after 47, 48. This is when Branch Rickey releases him, frees him, emancipates him from that biblical admonition to turn the other cheek. And at this point, Robinson really straightens his backbone. He argues with umpires over bad calls. He argues with other players and managers and so forth. And for the rest of his life, he becomes really assertive and aggressive in pursuing first-class citizenship for Black Americans on and off the field. And he lets go of the patience that he embraced in 47, and he becomes a fantastic civil rights leader. And I think that's important. He had his conflicts with Malcolm X. They differed over racial segregation and the use of any means necessary. But he admired Malcolm X for Malcolm X's impatience. And he became more impatient. Robinson became more impatient, I think, as his life went on.
Finally, I'll wrap up with this one, Michael. Baseball right now, there is an increased discussion surrounding diversity and perhaps a lack of Black players currently in Major League Baseball. What do you feel like the league needs to do to improve that situation and answer some of those doubters?
You know, when Robinson left, as I mentioned before, 5.6% of all players on rosters were Black players. And I think that figure has jumped at the most 2 percentage points this year. I can't imagine Robinson would be not displeased with that. I think he would be livid at that figure. I think he would be very upset as well that there aren't more Black faces in the front offices, that there aren't more Black faces managing baseball. 9 days before he died, he threw out the ceremonial pitch at the second World Series. And he said to a nationally televised audience, I'm happy to be here, I'm pleased to be here, but I'll be a lot happier and more pleased when I look down third baseline and see a Black face managing baseball. 9 days before he died, he said that. So I think he would be upset at the way Major League Baseball is right now in terms of the absence of color, right? So what can we do about it? I just saw that Major League Baseball hired Ken Griffey Jr. for issues of, to take care of, or at least address issues of diversity and development among urban youth. That's a tall order, it really is. You know, baseball itself is not a fast sport. It's not attractive and sexy like the NBA, like the NFL. And so just as a sport, it lacks the sexiness of those other sports, I think. But it's also up against social figures, social forces, like the lack of green space in urban areas, like poverty. You know, it takes a lot of money to play baseball and field a team. It's not like just getting a soccer ball and kicking it around. It takes considerable resources. And so Ken Griffey and Major League Baseball are also up against some social forces. So I wish them the best. There are no easy answers to this. I think one answer is definitely bringing more Black faces and faces of color into the front office, so we see a greater change of perspective.
He is the author and editor of 3 books on Jackie Robinson: First Class Citizenship, The Civil Rights Letters of Jackie Robinson, Beyond Home Plate, Jackie Robinson on Life After Baseball, and Jackie Robinson, A Spiritual Biography. Michael G. Long, thank you so much for taking some time today.
Great to be with you, Nick. Thanks so much.
We'll be back with more one-on-one right after this.
One has a brand new YouTube channel. Subscribe to WFUV Sports to catch our simulcast Saturday nights and get notifications so you never miss another show. Miss the show? You can find on-demand segments, interviews, and highlights every week. WFUV Sports, home to New York's longest-running sports call-in show and the flagship station of Fordham Athletics. It's WFUV and WFUV HD, New York. Listener-supported public media from Fordham, the Jesuit University of New York. Right here on 90.7 FM, WFUV.org, and WFUVSports.org. This is One on One, New York's longest-running sports call-in show on 90.7 FM, WFUV.org, and WFUVSports.org.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to One on One. I'm Kayla Wentzel, joining Chris Hennessy and Ryan Gregware. And our next headline is going to be about MLB's opening week. So this week we saw all the teams take the field for the first time in a year, and the Yankees had a rough start. They've had a rocky beginning here. So Aaron Judge missed Wednesday and Friday's games due to soreness on his left side. And so in 2019, Judge sat out for 2 months due to these oblique strains, which would be on his left and right sides. And so while he did play in today's game, this is a concerning start for Judge. And so Ryan, I want to know, are you worried about how this is going to affect him in the long term? It's only the first couple games and he already sat out. So how do you see this going for him throughout the rest of the season?
Yeah, for the longest time, I was a huge defender and he's not injury prone. I thought the 2018 injury was a fluke. He got hit by a pitch and then obliques. I was like, all right, that's one thing. Last year, and you can't really make excuses anymore, honestly. It is what it is. He's a big guy. He's an amazing fielder and everything. So he puts his body on the line. Stuff's going to happen. And I'm not going to say that I'm, lackadaisical. I am a little concerned here. People are speculating, and I don't want to speculate, but that this sore could be due to the vaccine. We've seen other Yankees. Gio Urshela got put on the COVID list for the vaccine. So if it's that, then I'm probably not concerned, but there's no way to know. Obviously, he's not saying anything, and there's no reason to, speculate here. And it's definitely something that's concerning because Aaron Judge is so important to this lineup, especially with Luke Voigt out, who really kind of carried the load for most of the year last year. You need Judge in the lineup and in the field too, because he's so good in right field. He's such a presence in the lineup, and, you're going to get your bangs along the way. And I know that's in the new baseball. You're not playing 162 games. You're sitting out to get healthy, but this clearly is something to be concerned about because, he had the off day and he had the two kind of, sit out games sandwiched in between the off day. So hopefully that gets him right. Hopefully he's at 100% because the Yankees do need him. You talked about, the slow start. I'm not that concerned with that. Obviously he's out, Voigt's out. I think they'll ride the ship, but I am keeping an eye on Judge, see how he looks in the field, see if he looks comfortable at the plate because this team really needs him to be healthy.
Yeah, I think you have to be concerned with Aaron Judge. Before there's even soreness, you have to be concerned because this is what's happened each of the last 4 seasons. He did just strike out in the first inning, but he's now playing the field, so he didn't get pulled that early. The little victories. But it comes off the heels of the worst game of the season so far for the Yankees. Friday night, they lose 10-5 to Tampa. Kluber was pretty pathetic and not a good game all around. But you have to be concerned. You have to be concerned with everybody on this team. You have to be concerned with Glaber's defense because we've seen in the past that has not been good at shortstop. You have to be concerned about Sanchez's strikeouts because he strikes out all the time. We are returning the same core for the 4th year, 5th year in a row. So when something happens, right, that meets the narratives of previous seasons, it's okay to, what others might say, overreact early in the season because it's not early because we have 4 years of history that Aaron Judge gets hurt every single year and he misses time every single year. So I am concerned. I have to be. Yeah,
I think that especially he is injury prone. Whatever people want to say about it, he clearly is injury prone. And so I think there's a level of caution that that Boone is going to approach with him really about when he wants to push him versus when he doesn't. And somebody who is injury prone is not going to be challenged all that often in games when he could if he's feeling a little something, they're going to sit him out of an abundance of caution. And so, I mean, I think to me, it's kind of like soreness is sort of weird. It seems really vague to me. I mean, I'm sure that all baseball players, all athletes are sore at parts of their life. But I think that the fact that Boone sat him for 2 games is very telling, that even if Judge has something kind of minor, something like being sore, they are going to take that, and they are going to take that with so much caution, and that they are not going to play him, and they'd rather bench him than hurt him like further. And so I think that that's something that can be concerned about, because that could be a trend that can continue all season long. When something minor is wrong with Judge, Boone will sit him because he doesn't want him to be hurt. And like you said, I think that it is concerning just as a whole for the entire team. I mean, Gleyber Torres has not been playing well. His error cost them a game. And so I think that it's concerning for the team as a whole, as is also concerning for Judge as a player. Because like you said, Chris, we've seen this core for 4 years, maybe 5, and they're probably not all going to be here next year. I imagine that the Yankees are going to make some changes coming up in the future if this doesn't work out. And already to start off with Judge missing 2 games because he was sore, I think that that is something that speaks volumes for how the rest of the season will go.
I do think it's big that he did play today, because the Trop has been kind of a nightmare, and the turf in general. I know that Boone has tried to keep him off the turf. I think he's got injured on the turf before. So it is encouraging to see him in right field. You know, he looked good in practice and everything. And so I do think if this was from COVID or whatever, this vaccine, then I'm not like that concerned about the immediate thing. But when I look at this team as a whole, there are other concerns. It's not just Aaron Judge's health. As you mentioned, Gleyber Torres at shortstop is becoming an issue. For years, he was a second baseman. Obviously, they brought DJ in, and he was a shortstop who he'll catch what's hit to you, and he's not going to do anything crazy in the field. And it's regressed this year. And now he's not catching what's in front of him. You talked about that big error against the Orioles in extra innings the other day. That really hurt. So they need to right that ship. And overall, the situational hitting has not been there with this team. The relievers and the pitching staff was really good until that kind of, retool game against Tampa where they gave up 10 runs. I think they had a sub-2 ERA going into that game. And the Yankees have been slow starters in the past. It's not like, they always start red hot. They started 6-7 in 2018, 5-8 in 2019. So I'm not one to flip out over, it's an 162 game season. I'm not going to flip out over a few plays, a few things here, but I just need this team healthy, because the next man up was 2019. It was a magical run. Anyone who came in was hitting. And after that, I got tired of the injuries. Obviously, I never want to see anyone get hurt, but I don't want any more next man up with these Yankees. I want the man up who should be up, because it really is at a certain point, the depth runs out, and you're throwing out guys that you can't be throwing out. And, the Yankees, they revamped the entire medical staff going to 2020. That was a COVID year, a 60-game season, ton of weird things here. They did get hurt a ton, but, that year was just a really weird year. This is a full 162-game season. So you need all hands on deck, because, as you guys mentioned, this core has been together for 4 or 5 years. And I feel like after 2017, if you asked me in 2021, would the Yankees have a title or at least a World Series appearance, I'd put all my money in the table saying yes, because of how promising they've looked. And obviously,
one game away.
Yeah, one game away.
And
then another, 2 games away in 2019. And I'm not going to talk about the Astros situation, because the Yankees really should have got to a World Series with this core. And this year is a huge year. The salary, it keeps climbing because they had this young core. Remember the baby bombers? They're not babies anymore. They're getting older. Judge is almost at 30. These guys are going to be free agents soon. They have to start paying up real money. So, things have to be done with this Yankees team. I am not as optimistic as I've been in the past, just because of how these seasons have unfolded. But I do think they can ride the ship. They just need everyone healthy, especially Aaron Judge.
You mentioned a couple things there, Ryan. First of all, the turf at Tropicana. You can sit guys at the turf until the ALDS is being played there. Then what?
Yep.
That's all. And the other thing you mentioned was slow starts to 28. Well, Kayla, you're like, come on. Baseball field.
That's all.
It's not hard. Anyways, you mentioned the slow starts of 2018, 2019. That's fine. They ended up riding the ship. They get the wild card in 2018. They win the division in 2019. But they still had the same issues, and they still didn't win the World Series. So when it looks like you're just replaying the same this freaking thing over and over again. God, it's infuriating. It's like I don't know. I'm not in love with Aaron Boone. I'll just put that out there because the situational hitting, the fielding, it's been a complete disaster this year. It's been a disaster. So 3-4. I'm already done. But
already just begun, and Chris is over the Yankee season. He doesn't want to see it anymore. He's tired of this. Well, so kind of switching a little bit away from the Yankees and now moving over to Trevor Bauer, who seems to always be in the center of drama or creating drama. So the MLB has already collected baseballs from Bauer's start against the A's, and they are investigating a foreign substance that they found on the baseballs, and they said that it had visible marks on it. So this is coming from the MLB's recent ban and prohibition of sticky substances for pitchers to use on their baseballs. And so they said in the beginning of the season that they were going to really crack down on this more. And so now they're targeting Bauer, or at least that's how he feels. He feels he's being targeted. And so he took to Twitter to voice his displeasure about this matter. And he says that there is no way to prove that the sticky substances or that the marks came from his glove, that you can't tie him to this at all. So, Ryan, what do you think about it? I kind of think he's right. There's no way you can tie him to this. I think it's a little crazy, but I don't know.
No, yeah, I think we're going to have an interesting conversation here because as me and Chris, I think, disagreed in the rundown. And I do think, Dave Roberts, I love that he stuck up for Bauer. He thinks Bauer's being targeted. And I do think this is just a little ridiculous. They said that the balls were sticky. Bauer says it's not from him. I feel like the MLB should be doing more. I don't think this is what they should focus on. But on their sake, Bauer is the perfect guy to go after for a number of reasons. Obviously, he's trashed Rob Manfred. He's thrown him through the mud. He's done everything to really make him on the bad side of the MLB commissioner. So I guess if what I see here is, they're grasping at straws to try to put Bauer down. But the MLBPA has said they're going to challenge any discipline. It looks like Bauer's fighting this a lot. His agent is calling everything on this. So it doesn't look to me like Bauer is necessarily doing anything, too bad. Obviously, I don't have the baseballs. I'm not the MLB. So I'm not going to sit here and say that he is innocent and, he's not doing anything wrong. But to me, just from the outside, it looks like they're just trying to make an example of Bauer to kind of have pitchers in the back of their mind. Remember that the MLB could target you if you're doing something. So I do think that is interesting, but, it's interesting that early in the season, we're already talking Trevor Bauer, and it's not for his on-field performance, it's something off it, which I think is very interesting because Bauer seems to always be in the news for one way or another. We can discuss that later, but I'm not really buying this. I think that I don't see anything big coming from this, but we'll see. Maybe they do find some crazy evidence that Bauer's done something wrong.
Yeah, I'm not a huge Trevor Bauer fan for a couple of reasons, like what I mentioned before. When the Astros cheated, we know that now, but not in the way that Trevor Bauer, accused them of, which is every pitcher who goes there gets a higher spin rate. Well, you got a higure spin rate last year and you won the Cy Young against teams. So were you cheating too? I don't know. I wonder. Your spin rate can go up. You can practice like that thing. Those kind of things happen. But I think he's very honest about the job that Rob Manfred has done or has not done, and I think that that's good for the game, honestly. But the whole thing with the Mets and his personal store and the hats that say and the shirts, that was ridiculous. That was absurd. that was so. I'm not even a Mets fan. That aggravated me. It was so ridiculous. But in terms of this, I think it's hard to have an opinion until we know if he's getting suspended or not, if he's done it or not. I could sit here and say, yeah, they're targeting him, but if he did it, then they were targeting for the right reasons. I could sit here and say he's a guy who tries to gain competitive advantage, who, similar to if you're a golf person, like he's kind of the Bryson DeChambeau of baseball. It's kind of science-y and does all these weird things. And maybe he put something on his glove or on his mitt or his hand that wasn't allowed to be there and didn't know it. And then it's going to say, well, he should have gotten punished. So it's hard to know really until the report comes out. But it is pretty easy to say now that, yeah, it's looks like he's being targeted, but it's possible, just like anything. It's innocent until proven guilty, but guilty is an option.
Guilty is an option. You're right, Chris, but I don't know. I think that it is a little okay. So for starters, I want to say that I don't really respect Trevor Bauer. I think that he blows up on Twitter and that his personal life is too much. It's too much all over the place. And I agree with Chris. The Mets thing was absolutely insane. So I think that he has the potential to go a little off the rails here. But I think that it is kind of a little bit of an unfair targeting, only because I am certain that Trevor Bauer is not the only person who puts a sticky substance on their baseballs when they're pitching. You know what I mean? Like, that's a widely used practice. And so while I support the MLB banning it and outlawing it and wanting to be more aggressive about it, I think that they have to be aggressive about it maybe in every game then. Like, if they really want to crack down on this, then they need to start looking at baseballs from all the times, from every games, not just from like a certain start. Because I imagine that most pitchers are using a substance to help their grip. And obviously I don't know that. I'm not an MLB pitcher, but that would be my thought, is that I think that, like Garrett Cole, E-Man had been on here a little while ago and talked about how Garrett Cole is always touching his cap before he pitches. And so it would be a little wild to think that none of them are using a foreign substance. But Trevor Bauer's point is that it's illegal for the pitcher to have like a sticky substance, but it's not illegal for like the catcher to have it on his chest and to like rub his chest and then throw the baseball back. Like, I don't know that you can, just because there is substances found on the baseballs, it could come from anyone in the field. It's illegal for pitchers to have. It's not necessarily illegal for catchers to have, maybe for the first baseman to have. Like, I think that it's hard to say that Bauer is the only one cheating. If he is found cheating, it's hard to be like, oh, it's just Bauer who's doing it. I think that it corroborates the entire team, because he might not have it on his person at all, but the catcher might have it, or the third baseman or something might have it. And when they throw the ball around, it gets on it. And so I just think it's hard to pinpoint. And I think that there won't be any suspension out of this, because it's going to be so incredibly challenging to pinpoint exactly who put the sticky substance on the baseball.
Well, it would open a can of worms if he got suspended, because then that'd have to be the policy going forward. And I don't think anyone wants that. I mean, I don't think that, I get making an example of him and he's the right guy to do it to, which is what I think they're doing. But if you're talking about real discipline here and he does get suspended, that does open up, anything could happen at that point. I want to stand by him on this Mets thing, because he's talked about it a lot. He's been really honest about it. Obviously the Mets hat stuff, that's messed up, but he said it wasn't him. If you think he was updating his website, minutes before he signed to the team, you're crazy. It was
no, come on, but it's his agents, it's his people.
It was his people. His people messed up. Okay, it's not like he was like, "Hey, let's troll the Mets fans."
You don't think he was a part of that? You don't think that he's
he's talked about how he saw that, and Rachel Luba talked about how she's never seen him more mad in his life. He couldn't stop cursing. He was so mad. He almost signed with the Mets because of that. It took as they talk about, he had to kind of cool off, go on a walk, because he was so upset at what happened. And he took complete accountability. It's not like he threw the people who messed up under the bus. Everyone who signed up for the hats, he's giving them, entering a raffle for future game. He donated to charity. Obviously,
a raffle
charity. Obviously, that doesn't do everything, but he did take accountability for it 100%. It's not like I know he's trolled in the past, the McGregor strut, all the stuff that he does, the antics. I like it because I think it's good for the game of baseball. As an MLB fan, it's no secret that the game is kind of dying a little bit. And what Bauer's able to do is get people to talk about the game. And so the hat thing, it wasn't him 100%, right? Like, it was his marketing. So I'm not going to just rip him completely for that. He apologized for it. And at the end of the day, I think Bauer is good for baseball. I get why people say he's cocky and all this stuff, but you need personalities, you need stars, and that's what Trevor Bauer is.
My issue really comes with, the hat thing was a little bit ridiculous, but it's like, why are you selling like Mets related merchandise? And that was a little weird too. Like, don't you kind of know?
I think
why would you make Mets merchandise? Like, that was weird too.
That was really deciding though between the Mets. It wasn't.
It was a mistake. Whatever. My issue really comes with this, because if you remember, the first thing he really got in the news for was cutting his hand on the drone, which is hilarious. But the second thing was the Astros spin rate thing. Every guy who goes to Houston increases their spin rate. Justin Verlander was an afterthought, going to retire. He goes to Houston, he wins a World Series. Garrett Cole gets better from Pittsburgh to Houston. And then last year, whose spin rate increased? Who won a Cy Young? And who took a team to the playoffs single-handedly? Trevor Bauer. Who this year is now being investigated for illegal substance? Trevor Bauer. Your spin rate can increase. That can happen. It doesn't mean that you're cheating. But when your spin rate increases, and then right after that, you're being investigated, even if it doesn't happen, you're being investigated for illegal substances. You cannot have it both ways. You can't be the guy who says, I don't like the Astros because they're cheating, but you have no proof of it, and then go out and do the same thing. You can't do that. That's not how it works. I'm sorry. It's not that you just can't do that.
I get that. Yeah. And listen, if it comes out that Trevor Bauer has been cheating and that's why he improved the spin rate, one, he's a huge analytics guy, so I wouldn't put it past him to just simply figure it out there. But if it does,
then why couldn't the Astros do that? Then why wasn't the thing that Justin Verlander did?
Right now, I get it.
New pitching coach and learning how to increase the spin rate. Why did
he was wrong in that sense? But am I going to scold him for accusing the Astros of cheating? Like just in general, no, because it's not like he didn't. He also talked about the lineup. He showed, like he pitched in there in the playoffs. He got rocked by guys that were cheating. So I'm not going to just scold him for, obviously he was wrong on that. But it's like if there was one team to wrongly accused of cheating in one aspect, it would be the Astros, right? And so if it does come out, though, that, he's been cheating, that's why his spin rate's up. Obviously, huge hypocrite. I wouldn't.
Ryan will be on here issuing an apology.
Yeah, I'll issue a Bauer-like apology. I'll enter a raffle. I'll donate some money. But if that does happen, yeah. But I think it's not inconceivable that he just got better.
I'm not saying that it's inconceivable that he got better, but I have a problem with Ryan, your point of that Bauer is great for baseball. I think Bauer's great for his own personal brand. I don't think Bauer brings any incredible prestige to the MLB. I think Bauer creates antics that increase his own popularity. They don't increase baseball. They don't lift baseball up. It doesn't elevate the league. I think it elevates himself and his social media presence and his brand value. I don't think that he is great. We want more personalities in baseball. I agree, we do. And I think we want players to be more fun and talkable and relate to them on social media. But Bauer is not that person. I think Bauer elevates himself and his level of antics because it supports his own brand and it creates him more recognition. But it doesn't get you talking about baseball. It gets you talking about Bauer. And so I think that that's an important distinction, I feel like.
Yeah, I am with you personally, Kayla, but that's going to end our Trevor Bauer discussion for today. He's an interesting character. He certainly has differing opinions for a lot of baseball fans. But we're going to come back in about 2 minutes. Pat DeCrescenzo, who is a member of the Fordham class of 2022, an aspiring Paralympian. Ryan and I spoke to him earlier in the week. We're going to play that interview for you right now, and we're going to come back, end the show with a little Masters talk as we bring you up to 2 a.m. here on WFUV. Stay with us.
Be sure to follow WFUV Sports on all of our social media platforms. At WFUV Sports on Twitter, at WFUV_sports on Instagram, and WFUV Sports on Facebook and YouTube. WFUV Sports, home to New York's longest-running sports call-in show and the flagship station of Fordham Athletics.
Welcome back to One-on-One, New York's longest-running sports call-in show here on 90.7 WFUV. Ryan Gregware, I'm Chris Hennessy. We're here with Patrick DeCrescenzo, an aspiring Paralympian, the Fordham class of 22 in the snowboarding event. Patrick, thanks for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you guys so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
So we'll start with one I'm sure you get a lot. How'd you get your start in snowboarding, being from New York City? How did that start for you?
Yeah, so this is an interesting question because you wouldn't think that someone from New York City would be a snowboarder, but basically what happened was that when I was younger, I was playing sports like baseball and basketball, and because of my disability, as I got older and things got more competitive, I started to get a little left behind from my peers, and I felt like a bigger gap in terms of the skill level. And my parents found this foundation in upstate New York, Windham, New York, called the Adaptive Sports Foundation. And basically what Adaptive does is they teach kids with cognitive and physical disabilities how to ski and snowboard. So I started out skiing with them in 2008. And I did that for 2 years. It was something that I liked, but it wasn't something that I really fell in love with until 2010 when I snowboarded for the first time. And I immediately knew that that was for me and that was my passion. So from that point forward, I knew that snowboarding was what I wanted to do.
So that was when, so I was going to ask just when, you start snowboarding, did it immediately click? Did you immediately know that you wanted to take it even further than just a hobby, or?
I think at first I wasn't sure about that because at first it was so hard to get down in the sense of like learning how to do it. Because snowboarding is an extremely hard sport to learn, let alone for an able-bodied person, even for someone with a physical disability. So at first it was really just the struggle and the challenge of actually learning how to snowboard on my own. But once I got past that and I was able to snowboard independently, I think that was when I realized that I wanted to take it to the next level, and that next level was racing.
So you mentioned you're from New York City, but you joined this program upstate.
Yeah.
But you have the decision to leave New York City coming out of high school, but you decide to come to Fordham and continue the snowboarding career. What plays into coming to Fordham, and how have you been able to keep up that snowboarding career in the Bronx?
Yeah, so it was one of those things where early on, a lot of people wanted me to move out west and to train with an academy or something like that. But at that point in high school, I wasn't ready to make that commitment just yet. And I really just wanted my high school experience in Brooklyn with my family and friends. And to have that, I thought that was more valuable at the time than going out west on my own and training at age 17, 18, whatever it was. And so when college came around, it was one of those things where I was really excited to get a good education at Fordham and everything and all the opportunities that it brings. And I was excited to be somewhat close to home. And it was one of those things that I knew that wherever I went to college, I was going to be able to commit extra time, to going out west because of the longer breaks and stuff like that. I knew that in college, I was going to be able to commit more time to it than high school because it's a little bit more flexible of a schedule. So I knew that wherever I was going to be able to commit that. And that's definitely proven to be true because I've definitely been able to get out to Utah a lot more ever since I started my time at Fordham.
Yeah, you talked about the education that Fordham gave you. And, I was curious, with obviously being a full-time college student and the snowboarding, how are you able to balance it? The workload, midterms, ram up finals, you have a ton of work. Let's say that was a week you wanted to go to the mountains. How are you able to balance it while continuing to train?
Yeah, so it's one of those things that I've really gotten used to over time because I've been doing it so much. And it's definitely difficult. I mean, I went out to Utah in December for 3 weeks, and I did all my finals in Utah, and it was definitely like kind of miserable because I would wake up like in the morning, like 7 o'clock to snowboard, and then I would come back and just be totally wiped out, and then I would have to like complete a final. It was one of those things where it was like very, very difficult, but I knew that I was doing it for like to progress in both academics and snowboarding. So it's one of those things that's just very worth it. It's worth the sacrifice in a sense to be able to commit time to both things because they're both things that I want to pursue and want to be rewarded from,
So you mentioned a physical disability. Would you mind, describing what that disability is and the message you would give to kids or adults who have a similar physical disability who want to get into a sport or snowboarding or basketball, whatever it might be?
Yeah, so I have this thing called hemiplegia, and it's a result of a stroke at birth. And basically what it is it's a partial paralysis of the left side of my body. So there's a lot of movements and certain fine motor things that I can't perform with the left side of my body as an able-bodied person would be able to. So in that sense, in snowboarding, it affects me with like balance and turning with both legs and just hip movement and stuff and a bunch of other things. But it's definitely one of those things where I had to adapt to every aspect of life. And yeah, I've adapted like over the years and like welcome new challenges in. And it's definitely like something that you have to get used to over time. But I was able to do it with the help of my family and friends. And some advice that I would give to someone in a similar predicament as me, I guess, is just a lot of times we focus on the things that are holding us back and the cards that we're dealt. But you have to realize that if you want something, you can have it regardless. And if you work hard enough and you adapt in any way and overcome any type of obstacle, like you'll be able to achieve that. So I think that with the proper motivation, that it could be done for sure.
Yeah, being obviously a snowboarder, you have a ton of experience. And something that I wondered as a skier myself is, sometimes you have a bad run down the mountain, you fall or whatever. And for me, at least, I kind of let myself get in my own head and maybe it ruins the day or something like that. I was just kind of wondering, what are some of the ways you're able to brush off, let's say like a bad run or something like that, put it behind you and kind of keep continuing?
Yeah, so that's definitely something that I've gotten better with as I got older and with maturity, because when I was younger, it was just something that I would get super, super frustrated about. And now that I'm a little bit older, I'm a little better at it. And you just have to remember sometimes that it's more about the greater purpose of why you're doing it, whether it be for anything. So, for example, like let's say you're going on a ski trip with your friends. Like the point of that trip is to have a great time and to enjoy the quality time with your friends. So it's one of those things, if you have a bad run, it's like you want to be able to get back up from it because you want to just have a great time with your friends. And in my situation, of course, I've had that too, because I love going on ski trips with my friends. But for snowboarding and the Paralympics being my goal, I have to remember like who I'm doing it for. Like I'm doing it to inspire the next generation of athletes who might have a disability and might be in the same predicament as me or something similar. And to know that I'm the person that they're going to be able to see and be like, I could do that too. And I want to be able to give everyone that thought of even being able to, because I was once in their shoes, seeing a Paralympian come down in 2014 in the Paralympics and saying, wow, like that's something that I could do. So I want people to know that it's something that they can accomplish too. So it's it happens to be like something that it can get you a little bit annoyed or frustrated, but you have to like remember what the greater purpose is and what you're doing it for, instead of like that little mistake that you might have made on the run.
You mentioned the Paralympics. What's the next step for you in getting to the 2022 games?
So right now, it's very exciting. The season's technically over, but I'm trying to do a lot of off snow stuff, like going to the gym and stuff like that. And hopefully I'm going to be able to get out to Utah again before the season ends. It really depends on my final schedule and if they have snow out there in May. But definitely going to start, maybe might make a few trips to some places that might have snow over the summer, like South America or Mount Hood in Oregon, just to get some extra training. But start the season early in November per se and get it going. And that's when all the races and the World Cups will start. And hopefully we get some good results from that.
So putting it past just the snowboarding, obviously you're studying communications at Fordham. Is there something after you graduate that you're planning to do, or is snowboarding what you're focusing on right now?
I definitely am very focused on my academics, and snowboarding and going to the Paralympics has been my lifelong dream, and it's been something that I have always and still want to do. But I also want to take my academics and career advancements further in that field as well.
Talk to me about the Paralympics. Like, when was the first time you watched it or you heard about it and you said, that's where I'm going, that's what I want to do? Was there a year? Was there an event? Was there a participant that really sticks out to you?
Yeah, so in 2014, I was 14 at the time. It was actually the first year that the snowboarding was in the Paralympics. It wasn't before. And there was this guy, Ben Tudhope, who is the same age as me, and he rides out of Australia. He has a similar disability as me. And my snowboard coach showed me a video of him riding and was like, hey, like this kid is going to the Paralympics. He's the same age as you. He has a similar disability. Like you should watch him when he goes to Sochi. So me and my parents sat down on the couch and we watched him. And as soon as he came down his run, my mom turned to me and she was like, Pat, like, you can do this too. And at that very moment, it clicked. It was one of those things where I was like, this kid is my age. Has a similar thing going on, and he's doing this on the grandest stage. And it's like, I could definitely do this. And I ended up meeting him in 2016 at my first World Cup. And I told him this, and I was like, you're super a big inspiration to me. And he was that figure for me that made me believe that I could do it. So that event in Sochi definitely propelled me to take this goal a lot more serious.
Has there ever been a point during this process and during the goal that maybe you thought about giving up, maybe thought about doing something else, or have you always been steer clear and with your vision to achieve what you want to do?
Yeah, I think with anything, there's always moments of doubt, and there's always moments that you'll be like, oh, maybe this isn't worth it. But then there's always those like special moments that come around, and most of the time they're interactions with other people, like positive interactions that like bring you back in and make you like think, hey, like this is a bigger thing than just snowboarding and coming down the mountain.
Talk to me about your first international competition. What was that like? What are the nerves going into that? Where was it? When was it? Because you said, the Paralympics weren't a thing for snowboarding until 2014. So how quick did that turn around as a teenager into an international competition?
So I started racing regionally in 2014, and I did my first international race in 2016 in the Netherlands. And it was it's called Landgraaf, Netherlands. And it's in this resort called Snow World, which is an indoor ski resort, which was super cool for me because I'd never seen anything like that before in my life. And I was very excited about it because I was a young kid, 16 years old, like going to a World Cup. Like I was just over the moon. And I remember going and being around everyone on the US team, on Team Italy, on Team France, and every country was there. And I just felt like, hey, like this is what I'm going to do. Like I can do this. Like this is possible. And I remember coming down after my second run, and they had this big like TV screen that was displaying all the times for the participants, and my name was up there and it said P. DeCrescenzo and my time, and it had an American flag next to it. And that was just a great moment for me because it was like, wow, I'm really like representing like the United States snowboarding right now in Europe. Like it was just the coolest thing ever.
Is that the moment where it like clicked for you what you're doing and how far you've came, or was there did you come to another realization somewhere else on the road?
I think that was definitely a big moment, but I think throughout my life in snowboarding and my time in training, there's been little things that have given me like the same rewarding feeling. Like for example, I was out in my last trip in Utah. There was this one trail that I was struggling with since I was 18 years old. And it was something that would always like get in my head mentally. And one of my personal goals was to conquer this course without like struggling. And I ended up doing it. And it was one of those things that in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really mean much because you're just kind of going down the mountain. It's not a competition or anything, but it's definitely one of those things that I was super excited about because it was a personal goal of mine to accomplish something. So I definitely have those little moments throughout that propel me to be more motivated.
Pat, we thank you so much for joining us. Pat DeCrescenzo, Fordham class of 22. You can read his piece in the New York Daily News about Pat and his journey to go to the Paralympics in 2022, represent the United States in the snowboarding event. Pat, thanks so much, my man.
Thank you guys so much. This is awesome.
We're absolutely rooting for you. We'll be right back one-on-one. Come back right after this.
To support the WFUV Sports Department, visit support.wfuv.org to become a member or make a one-time donation. WFUV Sports, home to New York's longest-running sports call-in show and the flagship station of Fordham Athletics.
Final 15 minutes of one-on-one this April 10th into 11th edition with Ryan Gregware. I'm Chris Hennessy. We're going to squeeze in some Masters talk here in the last 15 minutes of the program, the first April Masters since 2019. And it's been a really good tournament. It's been lower scoring than Dustin Johnson in November, but the Dustin Johnson victory in November, I should say. But it's been a lot of fun, and it's really tightly packed. An exciting leaderboard after 36 holes. And I mentioned Dustin Johnson. I think it's probably one of the bigger stories. You know, the defending champion misses the cut. It has happened in the past. Sergio just did it after he won in 2017. He missed the cut in 2018. And Dustin Johnson is also coming into the week the number one player in the world. And depending on who wins, that might change. He had a great 2020. He had a phenomenal 2020 and won his first Masters. But this is a tough start to 2021 for him. And it'll be interesting to see where he shapes up coming into the major schedule now with the PGA coming in May.
Yeah, he's the 12th Masters winner that won't play into the weekend the following year. Mm-hmm. Definitely the biggest story was him missing the cut. 3 bogeys on the last 4 holes. You know, he had problems chipping, and it really just wasn't his weekend. So it's definitely surprising to see him go this early.
Yeah, he got off to a slow start, and it just never really came back after that. And I mean, number one player in the world misses the cut at the Masters. That's always a big story. But the last guy to do that was Justin Rose. He takes the 18 and 36 hole lead, both at 7 under. He shot the 7 under round, of course, is phenomenal, 65. But he shot a really, really impressive 72 on Friday, where he was 3 over through 6 or 7 holes and was able to battle back in the back 9, which honestly leads to me to believe that he's going to be able to close this out, because you look at the back 9, right? That's where the money's made. That's where this thing is won and lost. You look back at 2019, going into the back 9, Tiger was not in the lead. He was behind Molinari. Brooks was right there. So was Finau. All those guys hit it into the water. He hits it on the green on 12, and he coasts to victory. Or he doesn't really coast to victory, but he rolls to victory after that. Back 9 is where this is made. The fact that he has a 36-hole lead and he's played well on the back 9 is really looking up for a guy who has never won the Masters. He's later in his career now. This is a really interesting guy to be in the lead, because I think there's a lot of storylines around him.
Yeah, I mean, he shoots a career best, 7 under on Thursday, and he struggled early Friday, as you talked about, and I was impressed with how he was able to claw his way back. He had some birdies, he went even on the day, so he's in great shape right now, 7 under, and it was impressive to see him claw back, because obviously, you talked about hasn't really been there, and so it was kind of crucial for him to kind of figure it out.
Yeah, we mentioned our vaccines. I drove 45 minutes to get mine, and by the time when I left and when I got there, it was a completely different lead. I checked the leaderboard. I'm waiting in line. It's like Justin Rose is all of a sudden bounced right back up to 7 under, and it looked like it was his tournament to lose. And it still somewhat does. We're here. It's 2:04. It's just a little bit after 2 p.m. here on Saturday. So it still kind of looks like as he's teeing off now, is in shape to take the 54-hole lead as well. Another guy, there's been so much Jordan Spieth talk, right? That's how this works. He had such a phenomenal year, and it was 6 years ago now, 2015. Just last week, he wins for the first time since 2017. He won the 2017 British Open and had not won an event from then until last week at the Valero Texas Open, obviously his home state. And now he's T4. T4 at 5 under through 36 holes. He's about to tee off right now. As we are recording this, I think this is the tournament. Really, winning the Texas Open is huge for him. He's played really, really well this year. Over like the Christmas break, kind of, he took 4 weeks where he didn't swing a single club. I heard that on Golf Channel this week, which is amazing. I think about, no professional athlete goes 4 weeks without doing what they do, but he needed that time. He's been great this year, but this is the course where we could finally say he's back. He's played well here before. He obviously won in 2015. He should have won in 2016 until he exploded. He's played well here in the past. Everybody talks about this major being the one that Tiger can win later, the one people can win later in their careers. It's also the one that can get him back on track.
Yeah, it's big to see him, possibly coming back, because we were texting about this and we we're like, I really hope he's back. It's good for the sport. Winning the Valero Open in Texas was huge for him. And then right now, obviously, he's had so much success. He knows this course. He's won this before. So he definitely is one of the biggest storylines to kind of come back when it looked like his career was on the downfall. And now he's put together some nice few days. And, we'll see if he can keep it up, because it'd be a great story.
It would. And I think so much has been made about his poor weekend play, really. If I remember back to the 2019 major season, coming into that, I was at the PGA with FUV at Bethpage, and he was tied for second. He was top 5 going into Saturday for sure. We did one-on-one on Saturday live from Bethpage, and he was top 5. We were talking about him potentially winning the tournament, and he fell off the face of the earth. So you hope that doesn't happen again this week. It looks like he's kind of beaten that a little bit. He played really well at Waste Management. He played really well at Pebble Beach and won the Valero Texas Open. So now, this is the only course really. I guess they're playing Torrey Pines for the U.S. Open, so he's played there before. But this is the course you come to every year to win a major, and all the other ones change. And this is the one where I think – I don't know that he necessarily wins it this week. I think it's only 2 shots, but it's a lot. I think the next major he wins, though, is a Masters. I do. And I thought that was true about Tiger, and obviously that came true. I think that's true about Phil. If he wins another one, it's going to be a Masters, just because we know, they know where they are. And it's very interesting. Another guy, Jordan Spieth and Justin Thomas will always be tied at the hip. They grew up very good friends, and they remain so. And they're about the same age. And Justin Thomas, 4 under through 36 holes. Excuse me. He's one of those guys. He's been there this is his 5th year playing in the Masters. And I think this is a really interesting stat. He's improved his position every single year he's played. So he went from in the 30s to the 20s to the 10s. And in November, he came and tied for 4th. So that would lead you to believe that he's going to come in 3rd, 2nd, or 1st. He hasn't won a major in a very long time now, since that PGA a couple of years ago. So 2017, I believe. He's that guy to me where it's amazing to me he doesn't have more than just the one. And I think when you look at who's ahead of him and how he's been playing, he just won the Players, not long ago, which is another big tournament. I think he can be the guy to pull this thing out. I actually did predict him to win on one-on-one Masters weekend in November as well. So I know I was wrong, so I'll try to be wrong again. But I actually do believe he's going to be the guy to pull this out. He's been playing so well, really, since the restart a year ago.
Yeah, I mean, he's playing hot right now, -6 under yesterday. So it's certainly encouraging to see where he goes. We'll see what happens here. He's got to make up a little ground. But, yeah, he's getting hot at the right time.
He certainly is. And one guy that you have to mention when you talk golf right now is Bryson DeChambeau. I mentioned him in the Trevor Bauer segment because I see a lot of similarities between those two guys. Very polarizing. At the end of the day, it's impossible to argue he's not good for the sport, and I despise him. Those are the similarities. But they're also very analytics and science-oriented. Bryson DeChambeau, he now looks like the Hulk, as you've seen, I'm sure. He played very poorly on Thursday. He played phenomenally on Friday. And he just double bogeyed 4 and bogeyed 5. So now he's 2 over, through 5 holes on Saturday. He won at Winged Foot, right? And that's an accomplishment that so few perform, right? It's the hardest course, one of the hardest courses the U.S. Open plays, and he was electric. I mean, he crushed everybody on the back nine on Sunday and won the whole thing. But now in 2 performances at Augusta, he's been really poor. Like Friday, he was good, but in November he was terrible. Thursday and today he has not been good. I wonder, because there's been a lot of conversation, like Rory McIlroy even admitted that he's trying to change his swing to be more like Bryson, to hit it farther. I wonder if people are going to kind of lay off of that method because they're seeing him struggle so much at the course that literally every single person who's ever picked up a golf club wants to win at. If he can't perform there, then why is Rory McIlroy going to try to put on this weight and hit the ball 370 yards?
Yeah, obviously you talked about how he struggled Thursday, but like when he's on, no one can drive like him. He could not hit the fairway at all Thursday. And I kind of, as I was watching on Friday, I kind of put him in the back of my mind because he shot so poorly and he's able to climb back. And, he's 5 under on Friday. So obviously, Saturday we're underway right now. So we'll see where it goes. But I do think it's really interesting. And you talked about, emulating his swing. And I think that's a good point because if he's going to struggle like that, why are you going to work so hard to try to, swing like him? So, yeah.
And if you can win in the U.S. Open, that's counts just as much as a Masters, right? But there's no guarantee that the next U.S. Open they play, he's going to do the same thing because it's at a different course. And I'll be honest, I don't like him. I think he's really cocky and really annoying, and I think he is good for the sport, and I think he is must-watch television, but I don't root for him. And I wonder if a guy like Rory or a guy like Matthew Wolff, another young guy who actually got DQ'd this week, who sees this and is like, well, why am I going to try to add 15 yards to my drive if I'm still not going to win at Augusta? I got to find another way to do this. I don't know. Bryson at Augusta is going to be must-watch television for as long as he looks like that. And he's going to look like that for a long time, presumably. I don't think he's going to cut that weight anytime soon because it's been working outside of Augusta for him. He obviously won his first major championship in September, whenever that was. Yeah, September. So it is my favorite 4 days of the year by far. It's not even close. Usually this collides with the first round of the NHL playoffs, which is chaos, but this year it doesn't. So that's good. But it is absolutely my favorite 4 days of the year. I do think that Justin Thomas is going to win. I that's my prediction. It honestly wasn't from the start, but seeing the way he played yesterday with that 600 round, I do think he's going to be the guy to take this thing home and win his first green jacket, which I think would be really good for him and really good for American golf headed into the Ryder Cup. I'm curious who your prediction for the winners is for this week.
Yeah, I mean, I like Justin Thomas as well, just because of how, good he looks right now. He was a guy to watch out for going in. And the 6 under, I like how he's playing going into this. Just kind of to shift back to Spieth here, I'm wondering, because you said you think he's going to win another Masters, and obviously you just said it's not going to be this one. What do you think he needs to do in this one to kind of have a successful overall 4 days here?
Well, he's got a putt, right? I mean, that's what he set himself up for in 2015 was he basically put together 2 of the greatest putting performances you're ever going to see at the Masters and at Chambers Bay for the U.S. Open. And when he started to struggle, he wasn't putting as well. And it was at courses where putting wasn't as important. Here it is, and if he can putt like he did in 2015, nobody can beat him. He hasn't since 2015, and man, I hope he does win this one because I think it'd be a phenomenal. It'd be kind of the end of the comeback, and he'd be right there with Thomas, McIlroy, Koepka, Johnson in the talks of the top golfers. And talk about good for American golf headed into the Ryder Cup. If they can get JT and Jordan Spieth right, there is no reason why they shouldn't win the Ryder Cup at Whistling Straits. All right, so that concludes our Masters talk. That actually concludes the program. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We're on every Saturday from 11 p.m. to 2 a.m., wherever you're finding us now. 90.7 FM, WFUV Sports on YouTube, WFUV Sports on Facebook. Also, be sure to tune in on Wednesdays at 9:30 for One-on-One Nightly, hour-and-a-half program. That's on Twitter and Facebook and YouTube and all the places you can find it. Not on the radio, but everywhere else on our socials at WFUV Sports. Thank you to Alex Wolz, Ryan Gregware, Kayla Wentzel. I'm Chris Hennessy. Thank you for joining us. One-on-One has been a production of WFUV Sports.